Evening, guys, we meet again. As always, it's Minecraft, Reddit stories, and your CrumbleBob. Tonight I've got a bunch of stories where the betrayal comes from the one person you'd least expect, Mom. Sounds rough, I know, but trust me, these stories will pull you in, and you'll want to hear how it all turned out. So settle in, relax, and let's get started. I, 28F, have a difficult relationship with my mom and younger sister Rose, 20F. When I was 16, my mom kicked me out of the house for having a boyfriend. It wasn't because I was doing drugs or stealing or anything like that, just because I was dating someone. She discovered I was seeing this guy from school and absolutely lost it. I ended up crashing on a friend's couch while still attending school. I began working at a local diner, saved every penny possible, and ultimately put myself through college. It was tough, but I managed to make it work without any assistance from my family. I worked morning shifts before school and evening shifts after, as well as weekends. I hardly had time to sleep, but I still managed to graduate and even save a bit of money. Fast forward to today. I have a good job in finance and purchased a small vacation house by the lake a couple of years ago. It isn't anything fancy, but I worked hard for it, and it means a great deal to me. It's the place I go on weekends to unwind and feel at peace. I saved for years to afford the down payment, worked extra hours, and even took on freelance projects on the side. The house needs some work. The kitchen is outdated, the deck requires repairs, and the plumbing is unpredictable. But it's mine, and I love it. My sister Rose has consistently been the golden child. When she became pregnant during her sophomore year of college, my mom welcomed her back home with open arms. Rose's boyfriend Joel moved in as well. He doesn't have a job, has zero ambition, and is perfectly happy living off my mom. He spends most days playing video games and complaining about how difficult it is to find a job in this economy. Meanwhile, Rose dropped out of college and has been hanging around the house doing nothing specific. Mom pays for everything, their food, clothes, phone bills, doctor appointments, all of it. I've maintained minimal contact with my family over the years. I still send birthday gifts and holiday cards, but don't visit often because every conversation with my mom feels like a reminder that I'm not as important as Rose. Whenever I do visit, Mom spends the entire time talking about Rose's achievements, however minor, while totally ignoring anything I've accomplished. It's exhausting and demoralizing, so I typically find an excuse to leave early. Last Sunday, I was enjoying my morning coffee at my lake house when my mom phoned. I knew something was off because she never calls unless she wants something. After some small talk, she dropped the bombshell. Rose and Joel are getting married, and they need my lake house as a wedding gift because they need a place to raise the baby. I almost choked on my coffee when she said this. The audacity was stunning. I asked why she was telling me this, and she flat out said she wanted me to give them my house. When I refused, she called me selfish and said family is supposed to help one another. I reminded her that I was kicked out at 16 and had to figure life out by myself. Her response? That was different because you brought it on yourself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. According to her logic, having a boyfriend at 16 was a crime deserving of homelessness, but getting pregnant in college and mooching off your parents indefinitely was perfectly fine. The conversation escalated quickly. Mom accused me of holding a grudge and punishing Rose for something that was not her fault. I told her Rose's choices were her own responsibility, and I wasn't sacrificing my stability for her mistakes. I pointed out that Rose and Joel were adults who needed to begin acting like it, instead of expecting handouts. Mom wasn't having it. She insisted that since I was financially stable and Rose wasn't, it was my duty to help her out. Mom hung up on me, but not before saying she expected me to reconsider. I told her I would not. She threatened to tell the entire family how selfish I was being. I told her she could tell them whatever she wanted, but my decision was final. The lake house was not up for discussion. Over the next couple of days, Rose and Joel both started messaging me. Rose said I was cruel in condemning her child to poverty. Joel sent a long text about how he had always admired me and hoped I would see the bigger picture. I told them I couldn't believe how cruel they were to bring a child into the world in their circumstances. let alone think of having one. I suggested they focus on getting jobs and saving money, rather than trying to take what I had worked for. Then my mom sent me a message detailing all the reasons why I owe this to Rose. She went on about how I was successful, while Rose just needed help getting back on her feet. She said Rose deserved a fresh start and that the baby needed a stable home environment. She even brought up how Rose had always looked up to me, which was news to me, and how this would be an opportunity for us to repair our relationship. I didn't reply because I knew it would only make things worse. So Reddit, Ida for refusing to give my lake house to my sister, and her now ex-boyfriend. I thought the barrage of calls and messages was bad, but what happened next left me stunned. It was so unexpected and shocking that I still can't wrap my mind around it. I just got home from work yesterday, looking forward to going to my lake house for the weekend when I got a notification from my security app about movement on the property. I installed security cameras after a break-in at a neighboring property last year, and I'm now incredibly grateful that I did. I checked the live feed and saw Rose and Joel on my porch. Joel was attempting to break in with a crowbar, while Rose stood guard. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Were they actually trying to break into my house? I called the police. The dispatcher asked for details about the situation, and I explained that family members were trying to break into my vacation property. She told me to stay on the line while officers were sent to the scene. While waiting for them to arrive, I could hear Rose through the feed, telling Joel to hurry up before they got caught. Joel snapped back that it was her fault they had to do this because she couldn't convince me to give them the house. When the police arrived, Rose and Joel tried to run but were caught before they could get to their car. Rose told the officers it was a misunderstanding and that she believed she had permission to be there. I showed the officers the security footage of Joel, clearly trying to break in with a crowbar while Rose kept watch. They arrested Joel for attempted burglary and Rose as an accessory. I gave a statement to the police, providing them with the security footage and explaining the background of the situation. The officers were sympathetic and assured me they would handle it properly. Mom called me the next day, furious. She said I overreacted by involving the police and should have laughed it off because they were just kids. I reminded her that Rose was a grown woman about to get married and have a child. I asked how long she was going to continue making excuses for her. Mom accused me of being heartless and said I didn't care about family. I pointed out that Rose and Joel were the ones who escalated things by attempting to break into my house. I told her since she likes using the family card so much, maybe she should reconsider calling me family since she cut me out years ago. She hung up on me again. I spent the remainder of the day dealing with the aftermath of the incident. I contacted a locksmith to change the locks on the lake house, even though Joel had not managed to get in. I also upgraded my security system to include motion sensors and better cameras. I was taking no chances at this point. Update 2. The fallout became worse. Rose stopped contacting me, thankfully, but my mom began calling daily. Her voicemails varied from crying to yelling. She claimed I was being cruel to Rose during her vulnerable time, and that I should drop the charges because family doesn't call the police on family. I blocked her number after the 5th voicemail, but that did not stop her. She began calling from different numbers, and I eventually had to screen all my calls. She even showed up at my apartment unannounced. I wasn't expecting visitors, so when I heard the knock, I presumed it was a package delivery. When I opened the door, she immediately began saying I was tearing the family apart. She pleaded with me to drop the charges against Rose and Joel and give them the house. She said they were facing serious legal consequences, and it was all my fault for being stubborn. I refused and said I was done being the scapegoat for their bad decisions. That was when my mom said if I didn't do this for Rose, I would regret it for the rest of my life. She said family was all we had, and once it was gone forever. She went on about how families should stick together through thick and thin, and how I was choosing material possessions over blood ties. For a moment, I wondered if I was being too harsh. The guilt trip was effective, I will give her that. Then I remembered everything I had been through. Being kicked out at 16, struggling on my own, never receiving any help. I asked my mom if she ever regretted kicking me out. She just stammered. I told her family goes both ways and I wasn't going to sacrifice myself for people who were never there for me. I reminded her that she had chosen Rose over me repeatedly, and now she was asking me to give up my hard-earned property for someone who had literally tried to break into it. She left without another word, slamming the door behind her. That night, Rose texted, "You've ruined my life." I was tempted to ignore it, but ended up replying that she was ruining her child's life and should consider adoption. I know it was petty, but I was fed up with the blame game. I was fed up with being made to feel guilty for protecting myself and my property. Update 3, I was right. Rose went on social media to paint me as the villain. She posted about how I was hoarding a vacation home, while she, a struggling, expectant mother, was facing homelessness. She conveniently omitted the break-in attempt and their arrests. She made it seem like I was some greedy monster who didn't care about her own family. Her posts were carefully constructed to get sympathy while portraying me in the worst possible light. Her posts were total drama, teary-eyed pictures of her standing outside a small apartment, with captions pleading for sympathy. She claimed she couldn't believe her own sister would forsake her during such a crucial time. She talked about how frightened she was about the future, and how she simply wanted stability for her unborn child. She even mentioned how she had nowhere to turn now that Joel was facing legal troubles, suggesting it was somehow my fault their relationship was strained. The comments were mixed. Some people called her out for airing her dirty laundry online, but others, mainly her friends, Joel's friends, and distant relatives, hurried to her defense with the whole family should help each other line. They said I was heartless for not helping my pregnant sister in her time of need. They didn't know the full story, of course, but that didn't prevent them from judging me based on Rose's distorted version of events. Mom jumped in too, siding with Rose and saying she couldn't believe how cold-hearted I had become. She commented on every post, adding her own details about how I had always been difficult, and how she had tried her best to make peace between us. She made it seem like I was the problem all along, completely rewriting history to suit her narrative. I tried to disregard it until Rose went too far. She posted a picture of my lake house with a caption saying something like, "This is the house my selfish sister is keeping all to herself while I struggle." The photo was obviously taken right before they were arrested during the break-in attempt. People began speculating about the house's location and value in the comments. Some even joked about showing up there to claim it for Rose. The violation of privacy was outrageous. I felt like my personal space was being invaded all over again. That was when I contacted a lawyer. He advised me to file for a restraining order against Rose and Joel, referencing the break-in and social media harassment, and to send a cease and desist letter about the posts. He explained that the social media campaign could be viewed as harassment and defamation, especially since it was encouraging others to potentially trespass on my property. He helped me collect all the evidence and file the required paperwork. This was no longer about the house. It was about protecting myself from people with no boundaries. The lawyer assured me that the restraining order would prevent Rose and Joel from coming near me or my property, but cautioned that it might not stop the social media attacks. He suggested documenting everything in case we had to take further legal action. Rose eventually stopped posting about me online after the restraining order, but then Mom decided to take matters into our own hands. She wasn't bound by the restraining order. She appeared at my lake house unannounced one Saturday morning while I was gardening. I had driven up early that morning to do some yard work and clear my mind. I was pulling weeds when I heard a car turn into the driveway. I didn't want to face her, but ignoring her would only make things worse. I got up, brushed the dirt from my hands, and prepared myself for another confrontation. Mom immediately started in on how I destroyed my relationship with Rose and ruined the family's reputation. She went on about how families should stick together, how Rose was struggling, and how I had abandoned her when she needed me most. She called me selfish for hoarding my success while Rose was drowning. She said people in town were talking about our family drama and how heartless I was being. She claimed I was making her look like a bad mother because I wouldn't help my sister. I let her talk until she ran out of steam. Then I told her I would not apologize for protecting what was mine. I reminded her about Rose's break-in attempt, their arrests, and the public humiliation campaign. I asked how any of that was meant to make me want to help them. I pointed out that their actions had consequences, and they couldn't expect me to just forgive and forget something so serious. Mom waved it off as if it was nothing. She said Rose was just desperate and didn't know what else to do. She said I should understand because I was once young and reckless too. She claimed that Rose was under a lot of stress with the pregnancy and that Joel had pushed her into the break-in attempt. She was making excuses again, just as she always did for Rose. That did it. I told Mom there's a big difference between making mistakes and refusing to accept accountability. I reminded her that when I was Rose's age, I didn't get handouts or sympathy. I got thrown out for having a boyfriend. I had been working and supporting myself for years by the time I was Rose's age, with no help from my family. I was living on my own, paying my own bills, and building my own future. I hadn't expected anyone to give me anything for free. Mom tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I told her I'd spent years building a life for myself without help from anyone, and I wasn't going to let Rose and Joel take that away just because they couldn't get their act together. I had worked too hard for what I had to simply hand it over to someone who hadn't earned it and didn't appreciate it. I had made sacrifices, delayed gratification, and planned carefully to get where I was. Rose and Joel had done none of that, yet they expected to be rewarded anyway. The conversation got heated. Mom accused me of being bitter and holding grudges. She said I was punishing Rose for something that happened years ago and needed to let it go for the family's sake. She claimed I was being petty and vindictive instead of focusing on what was important, family unity and supporting each other. She said I needed to be the bigger person because I was in a position to help, and should do so without conditions or expectations. I told her I was simply standing up for myself for the first time, and if she and Rose couldn't handle that, it wasn't my problem. I suggested she either kick Rose out or give up her own house to them since she was such a devoted mother. If she really believed in sacrificing for family, she could start by making sacrifices herself instead of expecting me to carry the burden. I was finished being the only one expected to give while everyone else took. Mom left angry, and I didn't hear from her or Rose for a couple of days. I tried to return to my routine, but I knew they weren't finished yet. Update 4. The social media attack paused for a while, but then began again. Mutual acquaintances started messaging me, some pleading with me to reconsider, others sending nasty messages. People I hadn't talked to in years suddenly had opinions about my personal affairs. Some offered to mediate between me and Rose, while others flat out accused me of being cruel and heartless. I realized that staying silent wasn't working. My side of the story wasn't being heard, and Rose's narrative was controlling the conversation. I decided to share my side of the story. I wrote a post explaining everything: how I was kicked out at 16, how I struggled for years working late nights while finishing high school, and how I eventually built a career that let me buy the lake house. I described the long hours, the sacrifices, and the determination it took to get where I am now. I explained that no one had offered to help me when I was homeless and desperate, yet I had managed to survive and prosper on my own. I then explained Rose's situation: getting pregnant in college, dropping out, moving home with her jobless boyfriend, and asking for handouts from everyone while doing nothing to earn trust or respect. I detailed the pattern of entitlement and dependency they had established, with Mom enabling their behavior every step of the way. I pointed out that Rose and Joel had been living rent-free with Mom for years without contributing anything to the household. Finally, I addressed the breaking point: their attempt to break into my house. I included a screenshot of the security footage showing Joel with the crowbar and Rose keeping watch. I made it crystal clear that the lake house was mine, purchased with my own money after years of sacrifice. I stated I had no obligation, legal, moral, or otherwise, to hand it over to anyone, especially not to people who treated me like an ATM. I emphasized that their actions were not only entitled, but actually criminal, and they were facing legal consequences for their choices, not because of anything I had done. The post gained traction quickly. Comments poured in with support, calling out the entitlement and manipulation I'd experienced. Some shared similar stories about toxic family dynamics, while others offered advice. A few asked why I hadn't gone no contact sooner. Honestly, I didn't have a good answer. Maybe I'd hoped things would improve, or maybe I'd feared the fallout. Perhaps I still held on to the guilt that was ingrained in me since I was a child, the notion that family ought to come first regardless of the situation. For whatever reason, I was at last beginning to see things with clarity. Not everybody was on my side. A few family members proposed I should have kept the matter private. I informed them that if they didn't keep quiet, I would post their messages next. A part of me felt some guilt, but then I recalled how publicly Rose and Mom had campaigned against me. They had decided to air our dirty laundry first, distorting the facts to fit their own story. I was just setting the record straight, the actual truth. If they disliked the consequences of their actions being revealed, they shouldn't have behaved that way to begin with. Rose responded instantly, inundating my phone with furious messages about how I had ruined her reputation and threatened her and Joel's future. I had to wonder what future she was referring to. They had no employment, no education, and no plans aside from living off of other people. What future was I allegedly ruining? They hadn't been building one in the first place. Their sole plan appeared to be taking what I had earned and claiming it as their own. Mom's messages were more begging than furious. She pleaded with me to remove the post, asserting it would embarrass the family and cause irreparable divides. She stated I was airing private issues publicly and making the situation worse for all of us. She insisted she was just attempting to help both of her daughters and find a resolution that would be suitable for everyone. I told her they brought this upon themselves by attacking me while I remained silent. I warned her that if they came for me again, I would not hold back. I was finished being the family doormat. That evening, a friend we both knew called to tell me Rose and Joel were in a panic, with Joel threatening to sue me for defamation. I laughed. Everything I had written was true, and I had proof. Besides, what money was he going to sue me with? He could not even afford his own place to live, much less legal fees. The threat was hollow, just like everything else about him. It was simply another attempt to bully me into giving them what they desired. That night, I felt a sense of peace. I would no longer be their easy target. For the first time in years, I felt I was really standing up for myself. I was not going to let them guilt or manipulate me any longer. I was not going to sacrifice my needs and boundaries for people who had never given me the same consideration. It was freeing to finally put my foot down and declare that enough was enough. Update 5. Last night, my phone rang, showing Rose's name on the screen. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but chose to answer, prepared for her typical accusations. I had my recorder running, just in case she said something I had to document for legal reasons. Instead, I heard sobbing. Not her typical manipulative tears, but deep, agonizing crying. Before I had a chance to ask what was wrong, Rose began wailing that Joel had broken up with her. He had packed his belongings and left, blaming her for the whole situation, the backlash from my post, their instability, and the pressure of their upcoming wedding. According to her, he told her she was toxic and he couldn't deal with her anymore. He had walked out on her and the baby without a second thought. She kept repeating that she didn't know what to do. She was scared and alone and didn't believe she could raise a child on her own. She had no employment, no savings, and no support network besides Mom, who was already struggling financially. She claimed she had hit rock bottom and couldn't see a way forward. She said she was calling me because she had nowhere else to go. For a moment, I nearly felt bad for her. Her pain appeared genuine for once, and the situation with Joel was without a doubt difficult. Then my anger resurfaced. I kept my voice even, but my words came out cold. I was not going to be manipulated by her tears or her crisis. I had been through worse at a younger age and had managed without help from anyone. She could do the same. I told her she had only herself to blame. She had chosen to have a baby with no plan, without considering the consequences, and with a man who clearly could not be a supportive partner. I asked what she had been thinking. Did she really believe Joel, who couldn't hold down a job or take responsibility for himself, would magically become a reliable husband and father? Had she not seen the warning signs that he was undependable and immature? Had she honestly thought he would step up when things got tough? She tried to cut in, but I continued. I reminded her of how she had spent weeks attacking me, trying to guilt me into giving her something I had worked for. I asked if she had been in her right mind when she decided to break into my house, when she stood there with Joel thinking it was acceptable to take what was not hers. I pointed out that her present situation was the direct consequence of her own choices and actions. She had chosen to get pregnant without financial stability. She had chosen to remain with Joel despite his lack of ambition. She had chosen to try and take my house instead of finding her own solution. Her sobbing quieted, replaced by a stunned silence. But I was not done. I had years of pent-up frustration to let out, and now that I had begun, I could not stop. She needed to hear the hard truth that everybody else in her life had been protecting her from. I told her that life is not a fairy tale where other people fix your mistakes. I asked how she intended to care for a child when she could not even care for herself. Did she believe Mom would solve all of her problems? Or was she still delusional enough to think I would rescue her in spite of everything? I suggested that she needed to begin taking responsibility for her own life and stop expecting others to bail her out each time things got difficult. I told her she needed to grow up and face reality instead of living in a fantasy world where everything works out without any effort or sacrifice. She finally spoke, her voice faint and trembling, saying I was stone cold and didn't comprehend how difficult her life was, or how much pressure she was under. She claimed I could not possibly understand what she was going through, because I didn't have children and had never been in her situation. She said I was being heartless in her moment of need, and that she had hoped I would show some compassion despite our differences. I laughed. I told her I knew precisely how hard life could be, because I had lived it. I reminded her how I had been kicked out at 16, with no safety net and no one to call for help. I had been younger than she was now and totally alone, yet I had survived and thrived. The difference between us was that I had taken responsibility and made something of myself, while she blamed everybody else for her mistakes. I had faced my challenges head-on instead of expecting others to fix them for me. The line went silent again. I did not wait for a response. I told her it was time to grow up and hung up. I felt no guilt or doubt. Rose had made her choices and now faced the consequences. It was not my job to fix her life. She needed to learn to stand on her own 2 feet, just as I had been forced to do years ago. Perhaps this would be the wake-up call she needed to finally start taking responsibility for herself and her child. Update 6. Last night, my doorbell rang without warning. I was not expecting anyone, and after everything that had happened, I was cautious of surprise visitors. Looking through the peephole, I saw Mom standing there looking disheveled. Her hair was a mess. Her clothes were wrinkled, and she looked as if she had not slept in days. I opened the door but did not invite her in. I crossed my arms and waited. I was not going to make this easy for her. Before she could speak, I stopped her. I told her if she was here to lecture me about Rose or plead with me to fix her mess, she should save her breath. I was not interested in another round of guilt trips or emotional manipulation. I had made my position clear, and it was not going to change. She looked stunned, opening and closing her mouth without words. I did not let her recover. I unleashed everything I had held back for years. All the hurt anger and resentment that had been building since I was 16 came pouring out. It was as if a dam had broken, and I could not have stopped it, even if I had wanted to. I told her she had been the worst mother I could imagine. I asked how she could kick out a 16-year-old for having a boyfriend, throwing me to the wolves without a second thought. I asked how she slept at night, knowing she let me fend for myself as a teenager, while Rose got chance after chance without any consequences. I reminded her how I had struggled to finish high school while working to support myself, how I had gone to bed hungry more times than I could count because I could not afford both food and rent. I asked if she had ever once thought about what I was going through, or if she had simply wiped me from her mind as soon as I walked out the door. Her hands trembled as she tried to offer excuses about being stressed back then. I cut her short. I told her stress did not justify abandoning one child while coddling another to the point of enabling destructive behavior. I pointed out how she had spent years bending over backward for Rose, cleaning up her messes, and now had the nerve to expect me to do the same. I reminded her that she had created this situation by teaching Rose that someone would always be there to fix her problems. She had raised Rose to be dependent and entitled, and now she was dealing with the consequences of her parenting choices. She winced as my voice rose. I told her I would not be the family's punching bag anymore, and if she thought she could guilt me into it, she was delusional. I was finished with being the scapegoat, the villain, the one expected to sacrifice everything while receiving nothing in return. I had made my life without their assistance, and I wasn't about to let them tear it down now. She finally spoke, saying weakly that I was being unfair, that she had made mistakes, was just trying to hold the family together. She insisted she loved both her daughters equally and hoped to find a solution that would suit everyone. She said she was simply trying to be a good mother to us both in the best way she knew how. I laughed and told her if she wanted a unified family, she should have treated her children the same, instead of casting me as the villain while painting Rose as a helpless victim. I pointed out that her concept of keeping the family together appeared to involve me giving up everything, while Rose offered nothing. That wasn't family, that was exploitation. Real families support one another mutually, not just take from one to give to another. Her face fell, but I felt nothing. I told her this was her mess to handle, not mine, and if she ever appeared at my door with this nonsense again, I would report her for harassment. I suggested she focus on helping Rose build some independence and self-reliance instead of searching for someone else to look after her. Rose needed to learn to stand on her own 2 feet, and Mom needed to quit enabling her destructive behavior. She attempted to protest, saying she was only trying to help Rose. I cut her off and told her it was her problem she'd only ever helped one child. I wasn't about to let her or Rose tear down what I had built. I had worked too hard for too long to get where I was, and I wasn't going to sacrifice anything because they couldn't get their act together. She stood there stunned, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly. I didn't allow her a chance to recover. I slammed the door in her face. "Figure it out, like the worthless rats you are," I told her before shutting the door. The words were cruel, but I was past caring. They had driven me to my breaking point, and I was finished playing nice. I know she will likely tell everyone I'm the villain, but I have decided to go no contact with all of them. I've blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, and directed my lawyer to manage any further communication. I'm sick of the drama, the manipulation, and the entitlement. I deserve peace and stability, and if that means severing ties with toxic family members, so be it. Let's dive straight into the next disaster. Hello? I'm sharing this because I need to get it out, and I don't know where else to put it. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons. I'm 27 now, male. The events I'm about to describe began to unfold when I was quite young, but the main incident happened when I was 17. My birth parents divorced when I was 9 years old. It wasn't amicable. There were arguments about assets, custody arrangements, the usual things that happen. Custody ended up being primarily with my mother. I visited my dad on alternating weekends and some holidays. My mother remarried about 3 years after the divorce, when I was 12. She married a man, my stepdad, who had 2 children of his own from a prior marriage. They were close to my age, a stepbrother a year older than me, and a stepsister, same age as me. So suddenly I went from being an only child in my mom's house to having 2 step-siblings. SD moved into our home, the one my mom received in the divorce settlement. It was a 3-bedroom place initially. My mom and SD took the master bedroom. I had one room, and SB and S were supposed to share the third, more spacious bedroom. This arrangement caused friction from the start. They complained about sharing, about the room size, about living in my house. SD eventually converted the small home office downstairs into a makeshift bedroom for SB after about 6 months of constant complaining from them, primarily directed at my mother, who usually gave in. SS kept the larger bedroom upstairs next to mine. Our life together was never easy. SD attempted to impose a one happy family dynamic that felt unnatural. He wasn't openly hostile towards me, but he clearly preferred his own children. My mom appeared stuck in the middle. She frequently tried to appease SB and SS, sometimes to my detriment. Small issues accumulated. My possessions would vanish from my room or shared spaces, only to turn up later in SB's or SS's hands, typically broken or used. When I mentioned this, the reply was often that I was being sensitive, or that I must have mislaid things, or that SBSS had merely borrowed them. My mom seldom supported me. She'd sigh and tell me to make more effort to get along or to keep my items more secure. School functions were another source of strain. My mom and SD attended activities for SB and SS, but frequently cited scheduling conflicts for my events, even basic parent-teacher conferences. My dad attended everything he could from his side, but he lived approximately an hour away, making weekday activities challenging. SD made remarks about my academic performance compared to his children, typically emphasizing areas where they allegedly excelled, even if it wasn't factually correct. He once commented during dinner that it was a pity my grades weren't as naturally robust as SB's, even though I consistently maintained a higher GPA. My mom didn't oppose him. The step-siblings themselves treated me with apathy bordering on disdain when SD and my mom weren't present. They kept me out of activities, made sarcastic remarks about my dad, my appearance, my hobbies. They frequently showed a different demeanor to their father and my mother, behaving politely, or at least neutrally, when they were around. I soon realized that complaining directly about SB or SS only led to me being branded a troublemaker or incapable of adapting. My mom repeatedly told me I needed to be less reclusive and try harder with them. My birth father died unexpectedly from a heart attack when I was 15. This was crushing. He was my primary support outside of the strained home environment. His passing also meant the weekend visits ceased, and I was in the home with my mom. SS became very preoccupied with social status and frequently made comments unfavorably comparing our family's finances or belongings to her friends' families. I withdrew more into my schoolwork and hobbies, spending most of my time in my room or at a friend's home. The summer I turned 17, my mom and SD planned a week-long anniversary trip, leaving me, SB, now 18, and SS 17 at home alone. My paternal grandparents offered for me to stay with them, but my mom insisted it would be all right, that we were old enough, and that leaving me behind while SB and SS remained would cause needless drama. She left emergency contacts, funds for food, and directions. The initial few days were calm. SB and SS largely paid me no mind, invited friends over, ordered pizza. I stayed secluded. On the third evening, they hosted a bigger group of friends. There was loud music, drinking. I noticed beer cans and liquor bottles. They must have had someone purchase for them. I remained in my room with the door secured. Near midnight, the noise lessened, as most of their friends departed. Later that evening, perhaps 2 a.m., I heard a disturbance downstairs. I remained still at first. Then I heard SS shriek my name, followed by yelling. Despite my better judgment, I unlatched my door and approached the stairs. SB and SS were in the downstairs hallway. SS was weeping, clutching her arm. SB was yelling that I shoved her down the stairs. I hadn't exited my room. I informed them of that. SB moved towards the stairs, shouting accusations. SS was wailing, stating I emerged from my room as she walked by, shouted something about the noise, and pushed her. She asserted she tumbled down the final few steps. It was entirely made up. I hadn't been close to the hallway. I suspect she probably stumbled or fell while intoxicated or messing around with SB or one of their remaining friends. I believe one or two were still present, but concealed or keeping silent in the living room. SB seized the home phone and dialed SD and my mom. He put the call on speaker. I heard him inform them, his voice trembling with feigned fury, that I had assaulted SS, shoving her down the stairs because I was upset about them having friends visit. SS added, weeping, that her arm pained her severely, and she believed I had fractured it. She claimed I had been complaining about them throughout the night. My mom took the call. She didn't inquire about my perspective. She instantly began shouting at me, labeling me vicious, questioning how I could commit such an act. I attempted to clarify I was in my room, that they were fabricating. She interrupted me. She stated she was aware I was envious of SB and SS, that I always had been. She called me a fucking failure who couldn't bear seeing them content. She informed SD she was correct, that I had profound issues. SD's voice emerged, composed but frigid, telling me I needed to confront consequences. He stated they were ending the trip early and would arrive home by morning. My mom returned to the call and instructed me to pack a bag. She declared I was not spending an additional night under that roof. She stated when they returned, I needed to be absent. She plainly declared I was no longer welcome in her home. I inquired where I was meant to go. She told me she did not care, that I should have considered that before I assaulted my stepsister. Then she ended the call. SB and SS appeared self-satisfied. SB told me to start packing. I went back to my room, secured the door, and remained there, stunned. I did not pack right away. I couldn't fully grasp it. I heard SB and SS conversing and chuckling softly downstairs after a while. Around 4 a.m., understanding my mom was earnest, I filled a backpack with garments, my laptop, phone charger, wallet, and a few vital papers I stored in my room. I had little money, perhaps $50. I waited until I heard SB and SS retreat to their rooms, likely for sleep. I crept out the rear door around 5 a.m. before sunrise. I had no other place to go, so I began walking toward the bus terminal. It was approximately a 5-mile trek. I utilized a payphone at the station. My phone's battery was depleted, and I wished to conserve it, to phone my paternal grandparents. I described briefly what occurred, that I was charged with something I didn't commit and expelled. They did not waver. My grandfather instructed me to remain there, and that he would drive down at once to collect me. It was roughly a 2-hour journey for him. I waited inside the terminal, observing the entrances. My grandfather reached around 8 a.m. He didn't push for specifics immediately, simply got me into the vehicle, purchased me breakfast at a diner on the return trip to their home. When we got to their house, my grandmother was awaiting. I recounted the complete tale to them. They credited my account. They were upset with my mother, but appeared resigned, stating she had altered after my dad passed away and after she remarried. They allowed me to reside in their guest room. My grandfather assisted me in collecting the remainder of my vital possessions from my mom's home several days later. He telephoned in advance. My mom declined to be present. SD greeted him at the door, permitted him inside to gather my belongings, mostly clothes, books, cherished items connected to my dad. As per my grandfather, SD was aloof and formal, did not inquire about me, simply wished him to depart swiftly. SB and SS were seemingly not at home. My mom never telephoned me. She did not attempt to reach me via my grandparents either. My stepsister's arm was not fractured. My grandfather learned from a neighbor it was merely bruised. The story they shared with neighbors and family friends was that I had anger issues and assaulted SS unprovoked. My grandparents helped me enroll in the local high school close to them for my senior year. It was disruptive, but I managed. They weren't well off, living on pensions and Social Security, but they supported me completely. I took on a part-time job after school and on weekends to help cover my expenses and save for college. I finished high school. My mom did not attend my graduation. I had absolutely no contact with her, SD, SB, or SS. The decade following that incident was focused on building my own life, completely separate from my mother and her new family. I remained with my grandparents through community college, holding down multiple jobs. They helped as much as they could, but finances were tight. I eventually transferred to a state university, taking out loans and continuing to work. I studied computer science. After graduating, I found employment. I moved to a different city for the job. I worked diligently, paid off my student loans aggressively, and eventually started doing well financially. I bought my own condo a couple of years ago. My grandparents are getting older, but are still managing in their home. I help them out financially now and visit often. They remain my sole real family connection. Throughout these 10 years, I maintained absolutely no contact with my mother, SD, SB, or SS. I blocked their numbers early on. I disregarded any attempts they might have made through mutual contacts, or extended family emails that occasionally got past filters. For me, that chapter of my life was closed. But about 3 weeks ago, my doorbell rang late one evening, around 9 p.m. I wasn't anticipating anyone. I looked through the peephole and I didn't recognize the individual right away. She appeared disheveled. When I opened the door, I have a security chain. I realized it was my mother. I hadn't seen her in 10 years. She looked far older than her actual age. She's in her late 50s. Her clothes were worn, appearing somewhat torn at the sleeve. She looked thin. She began speaking immediately, her voice strained. She said she found my address via some distant relatives she had contacted. She told me she had made dreadful mistakes. She explained, somewhat ramblingly, that things had taken a turn for the worse for her. SD had apparently lost his job some years back. They had depleted their savings. SB had persistent issues. She implied legal or addiction problems, but wasn't specific, that drained them financially. SS had moved out years prior and wanted little to do with them, particularly now that they had financial difficulties. Apparently, SD had left my mother about 6 months ago, moving in with his sister in another state. She lost the house, the one I grew up in, to foreclosure. She claimed she had been staying in shelters or with unwilling acquaintances for the past few weeks. She stated she regretted how she treated me, that she knew she was in the wrong back then. She mentioned she was desperate and had nowhere else to go. She inquired if I could assist her, specifically asking if she could stay with me for a period, just until she got back on her feet. She was weeping by this point. I did not let her inside. I remained at the door with the chain engaged. After hearing her out, I informed her I would not let her stay with me. Her expression dropped, but I stated I might be prepared to assist her under one particular condition. She inquired what it was. I informed her the condition was this: she must arrange a meeting. At this gathering, she, SB, and SS must be present. SD's attendance is not necessary. At this gathering, in my presence, SB and SS must furnish a written, signed statement, withdrawing the accusation they made against me when I was 17. They must concede they lied about the assault. Furthermore, my mother must verbally acknowledge that she knew or strongly suspected they were lying then, or at least knew my character well enough to know I wouldn't do that, and that she chose to believe them and abandon me regardless. She must declare clearly she knows I did not assault SS. I informed her I wished to record this entire interaction. If they fulfill this condition entirely, I will then discuss providing her with limited, temporary financial aid to secure basic housing, such as a deposit and first month's rent for a small apartment, and perhaps connect her with job resources. I will not offer continuous support, and she will never reside with me. She appeared shocked. She began to object, stating that getting SB and SS to agree would be impossible, that they wouldn't comply, that SB is difficult to even find sometimes. She asked if I could just assist her a little bit now, purely out of kindness. I reiterated the condition: a written signed retraction from SB and SS, a verbal recorded acknowledgement, an apology from her detailing her actions and knowledge. No fulfillment, no help. That's it. I told her to contact me if she manages to organize it. Then I closed the door. It's been 3 weeks. I haven't heard from her. I kinda expected that. But I keep replaying the conversation. Would I be the asshole if I stick to this condition? Knowing it likely means she gets no help from me and might genuinely be on the street? Update 1. It's been about 4 weeks since my original post. Thank you to everyone who read it and commented or sent messages. I read everything. I didn't expect that volume of response. A lot of people shared opinions. Many supported my condition. Some thought it was too harsh. Others suggested different approaches. I appreciate people taking the time. To clear up a few points people raised: why no police back then? Some asked why I didn't involve police when the accusation happened. I was 17, completely blindsided, and my own mother instantly believed the lie and told me to get out. Calling the police felt impossible and terrifying. Who would they believe? My word against 3 people, SB, SS, and likely a friend of theirs if pressed, with SS being a woman and my own parent backing them. It seemed like a way to make things even worse for myself at that moment. My priority was finding a safe place to go, which was my grandparents. Grandparents' role. My grandparents were and remain supportive. They believed me without question back then. They were angry with my mother but didn't force contact or reconciliation. They respected my decision to go no contact. They expressed sadness about the situation over the years but never pushed me. I've talked about the current situation with them. They back my decision and my condition, though my grandmother showed concern for my mother's well-being, which is common for her kind nature. They agree the condition tackles the main injustice. SD's situation, I don't have many specifics about SD, aside from what my mother briefly brought up. He lost his job, had financial troubles, and left my mother. I'm not interested in his situation except for how it led to my mother appearing at my door. He played a part in enabling his children and backing my mother's choice to kick me out, so his absence now doesn't create any sympathy for me. My financial situation? Some people assume things. I'm financially stable, not rich. I live comfortably, but prudently. Buying a condo was a big goal, accomplished through years of saving. Any help I provide would be carefully budgeted, and certainly not a blank check. The condo is a 1-bedroom unit. Having someone else live here isn't practical or wanted. Reading the comments and reflecting on it strengthened my position. The main issue isn't simply that my mother needs help now. It's the reason our relationship ended, and why she believes she's entitled to ask me for help after 10 years of silence that followed her clear rejection and false accusation support. They respected my decision to go no contact. They expressed sadness about the situation over the years, but never pushed me. I've talked about the current situation with them. They backed my decision and my condition, though my grandmother showed concern for my mother's well-being, which is common for her kind nature. They agree the condition tackles the main injustice. SD's situation, I don't have many specifics about SD, aside from what my mother briefly brought up. He lost his job, had financial troubles, and left my mother. I'm not interested in his situation except for how it led to my mother appearing at my door. He played a part in enabling his children and backing my mother's choice to kick me out. So his absence now doesn't create any sympathy for me, my financial situation. Some people assume things. I'm financially stable, not rich. I live comfortably, but prudently. Buying a condo was a big goal accomplished through years of saving. Any help I provide would be carefully budgeted, and certainly not a blank check. The condo is a 1-bedroom unit. Having someone else live here isn't practical or wanted. Reading the comments and reflecting on it strengthened my position. The main issue isn't simply that my mother needs help now, it's the reason our relationship ended, and why she believes she's entitled to ask me for help after 10 years of silence that followed her clear rejection and false accusation support. The framing wasn't a small teenage spat. It was a deliberate act that led to my homelessness at 17, right after losing my father. Her immediate belief in the lie and her cruel words, fucking failure, were choices she made. Her immediate belief in the lie and her cruel words, fucking failure, were choices she made. SD, SB, and SS also made their choices. The condition I set wasn't about revenge, though some commenters framed it that way. It was about establishing a baseline of truth. Without acknowledging what actually happened, and their roles in it, there's no basis for any kind of interaction, let alone me providing material support. Her showing up destitute doesn't erase the past or her actions. It just changes the power dynamic. Helping her without addressing the fundamental lie and betrayal feels like accepting her narrative, implicitly forgiving actions that were never apologized for, and allowing her, SB, and SS to maintain the falsehood. I decided sticking to the condition was the only path forward that respected my own history and boundaries. As I mentioned, 3 weeks passed after I initially told her the condition and closed the door. Then, about a week ago, so roughly 3 weeks after her first appearance, she contacted me. She didn't call. I received an email from an address I didn't recognize, but the name matched hers. The email was brief. She said she had spoken to SS. She claimed SS felt bad about how things occurred back then, but was unwilling to put anything in writing or attend a meeting. She claimed SS was concerned about legal trouble or bringing up the past. My mother then wrote that she hadn't been able to reach SB at all. She didn't know his current phone number or reliable whereabouts, only that he supposedly moved between acquaintances in another part of the state. My mother then restated her difficult situation. She spoke of being at another shelter that imposed strict time limits, and that time was expiring. She inquired once more if I might reconsider, perhaps provide a lesser degree of aid without bringing in SB and SS. She proposed that perhaps only she and I could convene, and she would offer a private apology. I responded to her email the next day. My response was likewise concise. I restated the initial condition exactly. A meeting, including her, SB, and SS. Signed written declarations from SB and SS, withdrawing the assault accusation and confessing their falsehood. Her personal verbal recorded acknowledgement of her part and awareness, containing the precise wording I demanded regarding her knowledge I was innocent and her decision to forsake me regardless. I made it plain that partial compliance, for instance, merely her apology, or only SS conveying indistinct regret through email, would not be accepted. The condition remained as articulated, unless and until she could verify she had precisely organized that. There was no more to deliberate concerning aid. She responded nearly at once to my email. The tone shifted. She stated I was acting cruelly and unreasonably. She charged me with intending to humble her and SB/SS. She remarked I had plainly inherited my father's obstinate tendency, a noteworthy remark, considering her prior quietness regarding him. She penned that she ought to have known I would not assist, that I was unfeeling. She concluded the email by stating she would not reach out to me further, and that I could contend with myself, aware I had abandoned my own mother during her period of difficulty. I did not respond to that subsequent email. I read it, filed it away, and have received no communication since then. That occurred approximately 6 days prior. Thus the result is that communication has halted once more. She overtly declined the condition and opted to portray me as cruel, instead of endeavoring to fulfill it or recognize its rationale. Nothing has shifted concerning my position. The prerequisite is still unfulfilled. No assistance has been rendered. Update 2. It has now been 6 months since my previous update, and approximately 7 months since my mother initially showed up at my entrance. Subsequent to the email conversation outlined in my prior update, wherein my mother rejected the condition and charged me with cruelty, there ensued absolute quiet for multiple months. I received no communication from her, nor from SB, SS, or SD. I proceeded with my life typically, attending to work, visiting my grandparents, and handling my personal matters. Approximately 2 months passed, therefore. Roughly 4 months following the last email correspondence, I obtained a message inquiry on a social media site I seldom utilize. It originated from my stepsister, SS. I nearly disregarded it, yet resolved to examine its content. The message was brief. She penned that she learned I had encountered our mother, and that Mom informed her regarding my stipulations. SS stated she does not distinctly recall that evening, referencing the night of the accusation, but that she regrets how badly things went awry. She then mentioned she is currently married, has a young child, and is endeavoring to construct her own existence. She affirmed she would not sign any declaration or participate in any gathering that might create difficulties for her family or her bond with her spouse, who seemingly is unaware of all the specifics of her history. She concluded by expressing hope I am faring well, but requested I not reach out to her again. I did not respond to SS's communication. Her indistinct non-recollection and emphasis on safeguarding her present existence, though comprehensible from her viewpoint, verified her reluctance to accept any accountability or furnish the demanded recantation. It strengthened the validity of my choice to establish the stipulation I did. If she genuinely felt remorse, she possessed the chance to act. She elected not to. Concerning my mother, I possess restricted second-hand information, primarily through my grandparents, who periodically hear snippets from distant kin or former neighbors. The situation is fragmented. It appears she passed some period in shelters, then potentially resided for a short duration with a cousin of hers many hours distant. That setup seemingly did not endure for long. The newest piece my grandmother overheard indicated she could be residing in a lodging house or a type of low-cost assisted accommodation, potentially holding a minimum wage employment. There is no verification of this, merely hearsay. She has initiated no additional efforts to reach me personally. SB's whereabouts are still unknown to my knowledge. No one within the family connections my grandparents can access appears to know his precise whereabouts or circumstances, confirming my mother's assertion about being unable to reach him. SD is likewise absent from the scene, apparently having no communication with my mother since her departure. SD is likewise absent from the scene, apparently having no communication with my mother since her departure. No significant disruptions have occurred in my personal life over the last 6 months. My work is steady. I visited my grandparents for Thanksgiving. They're doing all right, though my grandfather has some small health concerns we're keeping an eye on. They inquired if I'd received any further news from my mother. I mentioned the short exchange with SS, and they concurred. It demonstrated no true change or regret from that part of the family. Thus, the situation remains as it was following the last update. The requirement for assistance continues to be unfulfilled. My mother, having declined the terms, has looked for aid elsewhere or is coping through different methods, no matter how challenging. SS verified her reluctance to take part in mending the past. SB stays gone. My no-contact boundary with all of them stays firmly established. Nothing has been settled regarding family relationships, nor did I anticipate it would be. My life carries on along the course I forged after being compelled to leave at 17. The door stays shut unless the precise, non-negotiable requirement concerning the retraction and acknowledgement is completely satisfied. Considering S and SB's vanishing, the likelihood of that occurring appears virtually nil. That is the present situation. I don't expect to share more updates unless something major and unforeseen shifts, which I do not envision. Thanks again to those who read and provided viewpoints previously. Now, onto a story that will leave you speechless. I never imagined I'd be writing something like this on Unreddit, but here I am at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, trying to process all that's happened. This could be lengthy, so please stick with me. 5 years ago, when I was 17, my life changed forever. It began with what I thought was just a stubborn cold that wouldn't go away. My mom kept urging we go see our doctor again, even though I'd already gone twice and was told it was nothing serious. That third visit changed everything. Blood tests, then more blood tests, then specialists, and finally the diagnosis. Stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Aggressive. Advanced. The oncologist spoke with professional detachment about treatment protocols and survival rates, while my mom gripped my hand so hard it hurt. I was given exactly 1 week to sort out my affairs before starting intensive chemotherapy. The night before my first chemo session, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror for hours. I had these long, dark waves that reached halfway down my back. Everyone always commented on my hair. It was my thing, I guess. I knew it would fall out. The doctors had been quite clear about that. But knowing and experiencing are different things. I thought about cutting it short beforehand to make the transition less dramatic, but I couldn't manage to do it. 2 weeks into treatment, it began falling out in clumps on my pillow, in the shower, in my hands whenever I ran my fingers through it. It was falling out unevenly, making me appear diseased in the most visible way possible. I locked myself in the bathroom and sobbed. Not truly about the cancer, but about my hair. How vain is that? But it felt like the physical embodiment of everything being stripped away from me piece by piece. My mom knocked on the door for almost 20 minutes before I let her in. When I finally did, she had electric clippers in her hand. Without a word, she plugged them in, handed them to me, and knelt on the bathroom floor. "Me first, then you," she said. I didn't understand at first, but then it clicked. She was going to shave her head too. She was going to shave her head too. I tried to talk her out of it. Her hair was even longer than my own, this lovely auburn color that she'd always kept long. But she was insistent. "We'll grow it back together when this is over," she promised. "This is just temporary." So I shaved her head first, and then she shaved mine. We took a ridiculous selfie afterwards, both of us bald, attempting to smile through the tears. She printed it and taped it to my mirror with a note. "Hair grows back. You just focus on growing stronger." The treatments were brutal. I won't detail every aspect of chemotherapy here, but it's nothing like what they show in movies. It's not just feeling slightly tired or throwing up once. It's your entire body working against you, losing the ability to function properly. I spent more time in the hospital than at home. My mom slept in a chair beside my bed for days on end, working remotely on her laptop when I was asleep, always there when I opened my eyes. 4 months into my treatment, my mom caught a cold, but with my immune system compromised by chemo, we had to be careful. She stayed home for a few days while my dad took over hospital duty. When her cold didn't get better after a week, she finally went to the doctor. It wasn't a cold. It was pneumonia, and it had already advanced considerably because she'd ignored her own symptoms while taking care of me. They admitted her right away. I was in one wing of the hospital. She was in another. My dad ran back and forth between us, looking more exhausted each day. 3 weeks later, while I was hooked up to my chemo 4, a team of doctors came to speak with me, not my usual oncology team, but different doctors I hadn't seen before. They told me my mother's condition had worsened quickly. Her immune system had been compromised too, not from cancer treatment, but from exhaustion, stress, and neglecting her own health. The pneumonia had developed complications. They were moving her to intensive care. I demanded to see her. The doctors refused at first, saying I was too vulnerable to infection to leave the oncology floor. I ripped out my 4. Alarms went off. Nurses rushed in. Eventually, my oncologist stepped in and made arrangements for me to visit my mom in ICU with extreme precautions. Mask, gloves, gown, all necessary gear. She was intubated when I arrived, unresponsive. Her head was still mostly bald, with only a thin layer of soft new growth, far from the long auburn waves she was supposed to grow back with me. My dad stood by the window, looking out, his shoulders silently shaking. I made a promise to her then and there. I vowed I would grow my hair for both of us, that I would let it grow longer and longer until it touched my feet, if necessary, that I would always carry this visible reminder of her sacrifice. She passed away 3 days later. I wasn't present when it occurred. Also, that I would always carry this visible reminder of her sacrifice with me. She passed away 3 days later. I wasn't present when it occurred. I was undergoing emergency treatment for my own infection. They told me later that it was peaceful, that she didn't suffer at the end. I don't know if that's accurate, or if it's simply what they tell teenagers who lose their mothers to help them feel better. I completed my treatment 4 months later. Complete remission, the doctors declared. A miracle, considering how advanced my cancer had been. Everyone rejoiced. Everyone but me and my dad. We went home to an empty house where my mom's coffee mug remained on the kitchen counter, lipstick stains still visible. Dad couldn't bring himself to clean it for months. Staying true to my promise, I allowed my hair to grow. Through the awkward, fuzzy stage, through the uneven patches, through everything. It's been 5 years now. My hair reaches my lower back, thick, healthy, a visible testament to survival and remembrance. Sometimes I catch my dad looking at it with this expression I can't quite name, something between pride and unbearable sadness. Life went on, as it cruelly does. Dad withdrew into himself for a long time. He went to work, came home, warmed up whatever casserole the neighbors had left that week, and vanished into the den with a bottle of whiskey. We lived in parallel for almost 2 years, seldom discussing anything meaningful, certainly never mentioning Mom. Then about 8 months ago, he met Sarah. They were introduced by his coworker at a company function. Sarah works in human resources at another firm. She's in her mid-40s, divorced, with a daughter named Emma, who's about my age, 19 or so. When Dad first mentioned Sarah, I was actually relieved. He appeared less empty, began eating regular meals again, even tidied up the garage one weekend. When I finally met Sarah 3 months into their relationship, she appeared nice enough, careful, respectful. She didn't try to act like my mother or force any kind of instant bond. She asked questions about my studies, my friends, my plans for the future. Normal things. Emma was quieter, mostly kept to herself. She has pin-straight blonde hair that she wears in a perfect shoulder-length bob. She's studying fashion marketing or something. We didn't talk much, but it wasn't hostile, just awkward in that way blending families always is. Dad proposed to Sarah last month. It was quick, but at his age, I suppose people don't see the point in waiting. The wedding is set for this summer. I was genuinely happy for him, or at least I was trying to be. Mom would have wanted him to find someone. I'm sure of that. Everything was fine until last weekend. Sarah invited me over to her home to discuss wedding details. I assumed we'd be talking about bridesmaids' dresses or something similarly benign. Emma was there too, sitting at the kitchen aisle and flipping through bridal magazines. Sarah made tea, set out some cookies, and then very directly asked me if I would cut my hair for the wedding. I thought I'd misheard her at first, but no, she was completely serious. She explained that all the bridesmaids were planning to wear identical updos, and my hair was problematically long for the stylist to work with. She said something about how my hair would overwhelm the visual symmetry of the bridal party photos. Emma kept her eyes on the magazine, but I could see her nodding slightly. I explained, as calmly as I could, why my hair was long, what it represented, the promise I'd made. Sarah listened, or at least pretended to, and then said something that made Abbott mad. "Don't you think your mom would want you to move on by now? She wouldn't want you stuck in the past like this. Sometimes trimming your hair is simply trimming your hair. It doesn't need to be this grand symbolic gesture." I sat there stunned. This woman who had never known my mother was telling me what she would have desired, telling me that my promise, the single thing I had left linking me to her, was merely me dwelling on the past. Then she continued, "I'm not attempting to replace your mother, but I am going to be your stepmother. This is meant to be the happiest day of my life. Is a trim truly too much to ask? For a single day? For family unity?" I said nothing. I simply stood up and departed. Sarah called after me, claiming I was being immature and dramatic. By the time I arrived home, she had already telephoned my dad. He was waiting for me, appearing weary and conflicted. "Perhaps you could just think about it," he murmured. "Just this once. Just for the ceremony. It would mean a great deal to Sarah, and it would simplify things for everyone? Easier for everyone, or easier for you?" I inquired. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he stated, "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." Since then, I've gotten messages from my aunt, Dad's sister, 2 cousins, and even my grandmother, all implying I should compromise on this hair matter to properly welcome Sarah into the family. Evidently, Sarah has been placing phone calls. The sole person who hasn't attempted to persuade me to cut my hair is my best friend Jess, who also survived cancer in high school. She understands. She stated, "Promises to the dead matter more than wedding photos." But now I'm here, second-guessing myself. Am I being unreasonable? Is this simply hair? Am I clinging to the past in an unhealthy manner? Or is this a boundary I need to maintain? I no longer know. However, writing this out has helped somehow. If you've read this far, thanks for listening to a stranger ramble about hair and death and stepmothers. Update. 1. A month has passed since my original post, and I wanted to update for those who sent messages asking how things were going. Firstly, thank you to everyone who commented and messaged. I read everything, even though I didn't reply to most of it. It helped to realize I wasn't completely off base in my feelings. Things have become worse, not better. 3 days after my last post, my cousin Ellie texted me screenshots of a group chat I didn't know existed. 3 days after my last post, my cousin Ellie texted me screenshots of a group chat I didn't know existed. Sarah had created it, including various members of my family, aunts, uncles, cousins, even my dad's parents, but specifically excluding me. The chat was named Wedding Planning and Family Concerns. The screenshot showed Sarah offering her version of our conversation about my hair, portraying herself as the victim of my inflexibility and refusal to accept new family dynamics. She told everyone I was intentionally trying to make her feel insecure because she had thin, fine hair that couldn't measure up to mine. She wrote remarks such as, "I'm trying so hard to blend our families, but my name appears set on keeping us as outsiders." The reactions from my family were what pained me the most. People who had known me my whole life, who had come to see me in the hospital during cancer treatment, who had been at my mother's funeral, they were all siding with Sarah. My grandmother wrote, "She's always been stubborn like her mother." My aunt implied that trauma has made her somewhat self-absorbed. My uncle directly stated I needed therapy to move on from the past. Ellie forwarded the screenshots because she felt I should be aware of what people were saying, but even she also added a message saying, "Maybe consider a compromise. This seems to be getting out of hand." I was still taking all this in when my dad appeared at my apartment without warning the next day. He was carrying a cardboard box. He said little, just handed me the box and sat down with a thud on my couch. Inside were vintage photographs. I gazed up at my dad, perplexed. "What is this?" I simply thought, "You ought to see these," he said. His voice was level, devoid of feeling, the way it becomes when he's holding back tears. "I thought it might make you consider what your mom would truly wish for right now." "She would want me to keep my promise to her," I said. He shook his head slightly. "She wouldn't want you to create a division in the family because of hair. She was never so trivial." That word, trivial, it stung, as if keeping a deathbed promise was in some way trivial. I went to my bedroom without uttering another word. From the lowest drawer of my desk, I took out one of the journals I maintained during treatment. I located the entry I sought, dated a few days after Mom shaved her head, and carried it back to the living room. I passed it to my dad, open to the appropriate page. In my unsteady 17-year-old handwriting, I had penned, "Mom shaved her head for me today. She says we'll grow our hair back together when this is over. I'm scared I won't make it that far, but she's so sure. She keeps talking about how we'll go to the salon together for fancy treatments once my hair starts growing back. She made me promise that even if I feel like giving up, I'll keep fighting so we can have matching long hair again someday." I promised her I would. Dad read it, his hands shaking slightly. As he was reading, I brought up the screenshots Ellie had sent me and showed him extra ones she'd sent on later. Direct messages between Sarah and Emma that someone had screenshotted and posted in the family chat. Dad read these messages without a sound. Then he rose, collected the photos back into the box, and departed without another utterance. He didn't contend further or attempt to persuade me. He simply departed. I haven't had direct contact with him since that day. Contact has been solely via text messages, and they have been short and to the point. "Will you be at Sunday dinner? Can you drop off the lawnmower you borrowed?" Nothing about the wedding, nothing about Sarah, nothing about my hair. The family group chat screenshots continue to arrive from Ellie, though. The tone has changed from "how do we convince her" to "she's obviously not a team player." Sarah has begun discussing contingency plans for the wedding, having me stand in the back row for photos, having my hair professionally styled into something that would be less noticeable, or simply not having me as a bridesmaid at all. Yesterday, Ellie forwarded a message Sarah had written to the group. At this point, I'm starting to wonder if my name should even attend. This is supposed to be a celebration, not a memorial service. Her devotion to her dead mother's wishes is overshadowing everything. No one in the family chat disagreed with this statement. Not one person. I've begun to avoid family gatherings. I've ceased answering calls from relatives. Jess says I should hold my position, but it's becoming more difficult when it feels like I'm standing alone. The wedding is still months away. I don't know how this ends, but I know it will not conclude with me cutting my hair. Update 2. It's been another month, and things have taken a direction I didn't expect. 2 weeks after my last update, I got a text from my dad inquiring if we could meet at the neighborhood park we frequented when I was a child. I said yes. When I got there, he was already present, sitting on one of the benches by the duck pond. He appeared older somehow, with more gray at his temples than I recalled seeing previously. We remained quiet for several minutes before he spoke. "The wedding has been postponed," he stated at last, "for an indefinite period." I wasn't sure how to reply to that, so I simply waited. After I viewed those messages, he went on, gazing out at the pond. I began to pay closer attention, started observing things I'd been overlooking. He informed me that he'd confronted Sarah about the messages, and she'd attempted to dismiss it as wedding stress, and asserted she was simply trying to assist Emma with her self-esteem issues. He mentioned he might have even believed her if that had been the conclusion of it. "But then I discovered boxes in the garage," he stated. "Boxes containing your mom's belongings that I thought were still in the house. Photo albums, her recipe books, the ceramic bowl she crafted in that pottery class, her reading glasses. Just private items, things that were a part of our everyday life. Sarah had packed them all away. When I questioned her about it, she said she was simply helping me move forward and making room for new memories." His voice broke on the last few words. "She was deleting my mother," I said softly. My dad nodded. "It wasn't concerning your hair. It was never about your hair." He rubbed his face with his hands. "It was about eliminating any trace of her from our lives, and I nearly let it happen." We remained there a bit longer, watching a family feeding the ducks, before he spoke once more. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have listened to you. I should have realized what was occurring." The postponed wedding swiftly became a canceled wedding. Sarah informed everyone it was mutual. But from what Dad said, it was extremely one-sided. Once he began examining her behavior more critically, he couldn't unsee the pattern. She had been strategically isolating him from Mom's memories and from me, his strongest connection to Mom. The family chat erupted into chaos when the cancellation was announced. Sarah told everyone it was because Dad couldn't move on from his past, and I was emotionally manipulating him. Some relatives took her side, saying Dad was making a mistake. Others at last started questioning her narrative, particularly after my Aunt Martha, Mom's sister, got involved and started asking pointed questions about why Sarah was so fixated on my hair. Initially, 3 days after the part conversation, I received a direct message from Emma. I nearly didn't open it, but curiosity won out. I want to apologize. This whole situation got so out of control, and I played a part in it. My mom has always been obsessed with appearances. My entire life has been about looking perfect, having the right clothes, the right hair, fitting her image of what a daughter should be. When she saw your hair, it became this fixation for her. She repeatedly mentioned how it would disrupt all the wedding photos, how people would gaze at you instead of her, how my hair appeared thin and lifeless by comparison. She proceeded to explain that her mother had been remarking on her appearance her whole life, making her feel insufficient, exploiting her insecurities to manipulate her. She caused me to resent you when I scarcely knew you. She's skilled at identifying people's vulnerabilities and exploiting them. I'm not employing that as an excuse. I still took part, and I'm sorry for that. However, I wanted you to understand the broader context. Emma and I sent a few more messages after that, not precisely friendly, but civil, understanding. We discussed what it's like to be utilized as a pawn in someone else's game. We didn't become immediate stepsisters or best friends, but we ceased being antagonists. Sarah, in the meantime, has been informing anyone who will listen that our family is dysfunctional and trapped in the past, that we require therapy and cannot progress. She's contacted several relatives, attempting to persuade them to speak to Dad on her behalf, but most have ceased engaging with her entirely. One unforeseen result of all this is that I've been spending more time with my dad recently. We're not back to our usual state. I'm not certain what our usual state even resembles anymore, but we're conversing, not merely exchanging pleasantries. Last week he inquired if he could capture a picture of my hair. When I inquired why, he said, "Because your mom would be proud of how it turned out." And so am I. Update 3. It's been roughly 3 weeks since my previous update. Matters have stabilized somewhat, though normal still feels like a far-off idea. A week after the wedding was formally canceled, my dad inquired if we could have dinner together. Over pasta that neither of us did more than push around our plates, he attempted to explain how matters had gotten so off track. "When your mom died," he began, setting down his fork, "I didn't think I would survive it. Not just emotionally, I mean literally. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely remember to breathe. The only thing that kept me functioning at all was knowing you needed me." He explained that after my treatment concluded and I moved into my own apartment for college, he completely fell apart, took a leave of absence from work, barely left the house for weeks at a time. When I met Sarah, he said, it was like suddenly being able to breathe again. She was organized, practical, decisive, all the things I couldn't manage to be anymore. She handled everything, paid bills I'd been ignoring, called repairmen for things I'd let break, made actual meals instead of the cereal I'd been living on. I felt like I was rejoining the human race. He confessed he noticed the red flags, her slight critiques of the house's decor, done by Mom, her proposals that specific photos be shifted to less noticeable spots, her remarks about how some individuals never progress. But he disregarded them, fearing a return to the bleak state he was in before her. "On some level, I knew she was trying to erase your mother," he said. "I knew. But I convinced myself it was normal, that new partners always wish to leave their mark on things. I told myself it was good to put away some of the mementos. I told myself many things to avoid facing loss again, even if that loss was just a relationship that wasn't good for me. He mentioned that when the dispute concerning my hair started, he reverted to what had become his usual method: maintain Sarah's happiness no matter what. He urged me to yield because it was simpler than confronting her, simpler than risking the loss of this support system he'd grown reliant on. "I'm not proud of it," he said. "I put my need for stability above your need for support, above your promise to your mother, my wife." His eyes filled with tears. "I failed both of you." I didn't pardon him right away. The pain was still too fresh for that. But I did reach across the table, place my hand over his, and we remained that way for a long time. He mentioned he began seeing a therapist. Not couples counseling with Sarah, as she had seemingly proposed, as a final attempt to save the relationship, but individual therapy to process his grief and dependency issues. He's only completed 2 sessions so far, but he said it's already helping him realize how he's been leaning on relationships as a crutch instead of confronting his pain. Emma relocated from Sarah's home last week. She didn't reach out to me personally regarding it, but she did share on social media that she was making a fresh start and learning to define myself on my own terms. She's residing with her father presently, from what I can gather. I sent her a short message wishing her good fortune, and she replied with comparable brevity, but apparent sincerity. Dad and I have discussed taking a journey together later this year to scatter some of Mom's ashes at the shore where we had our final family vacation. We haven't finalized specific plans yet. We're both still getting comfortable in this new phase of our relationship, but the discussion itself felt like advancement. Last update. 6 months have passed since this whole situation started, and almost 3 months since my previous update. This will likely be my last post on the subject, not because everything is settled, but because life has moved into a new arrangement that feels, if not normal, at least manageable. Sarah and my father have had no communication for more than 2 months now. Their last encounter occurred when she showed up unannounced at our home. I've temporarily moved back in with Dad while my apartment complex undergoes significant renovations to retrieve a box of items she had left. Dad was at work, so I was the person who needed to handle her. She hardly glanced at me as I gave her the box Dad had prepared weeks before. As she turned to depart, she hesitated. "I wasn't attempting to replace your mother, you know," she stated without turning around. "I was simply attempting to make room for myself." By eliminating her, I responded. She gave her head a slight shake. "You wouldn't understand. You've never had to compete with a ghost." Then she proceeded to her vehicle without looking behind her. That short interaction has remained with me. So from her viewpoint, she was not the antagonist. She was merely contending for her spot. Thus, this is where I conclude this account. My gratitude goes to those who tracked this saga, who provided encouragement and understanding. Documenting it here assisted more than you realize. Occasionally, being acknowledged is the most restorative thing of all. Get ready, because the next story is even worse. I'm a 28-year-old guy. This whole mess really started recently, but the backstory began about 7 years ago. That's when my grandmother died. She was a good woman, and I miss her. In her will, she left her house to both me and my younger sister, Addison. Addison is 25 now. The will was quite clear. We both own the house, 50-50. Nothing complicated. When Grandma passed away, I was 21 and still at university, working towards my degree. Addison was 18, just completing high school. Our mother, Erica, had been living with Grandma, taking care of her in her last few years. Our mother, Erica, had been living with Grandma, taking care of her in her last few years. So, after Grandma passed away, Mom simply remained in the house. Addison lived there too, of course. It seemed sensible at the time. I was residing in student dorms, then in a succession of rather basic rental places, after I graduated and began working. I didn't need the space at Grandma's house. The arrangement was straightforward. Mom and Addison would reside in the house, and they wouldn't pay me any rent. In exchange, They were meant to cover all expenses such as property taxes, electricity, water, and the general maintenance of the property. I was fine with that. It felt like a practical solution, and I figured I was helping them out. My dad was never really present. He left when I was a child, so Mom raised me and Addison on her own. I always thought our relationship was quite normal. Maybe not super close all the time, but decent enough. I certainly never expected anything like what unfolded recently. Once I graduated at 22, I got a job and set a major goal for myself, to buy my own place. That became my primary focus. For 6 full years, I worked hard. I took nearly every overtime shift I could get. I didn't take lavish vacations or purchase costly gadgets or new cars. My car is old, but it runs. My clothes are fine, but not fancy. I packed my own lunch for work. Every spare bit of money went into a savings account. It was slow going, but I was determined. Friends would go out or plan trips, and most of the time, I had to say no. It was slow going, but I was determined. Friends would go out or plan trips, and most of the time, I had to say no. It wasn't always easy, but I kept picturing having my own keys to my own door. Earlier this year, I finally did it. I had saved up enough for a substantial down payment on a 2-bedroom apartment. It cost $200,000. It's in a respectable part of the city, not too flashy but safe and clean, and it significantly cuts my commute to work. Signing the documents for that apartment was one of the best days of my life. I spent the first month after getting the keys painting the walls myself. I purchased some basic furniture, a bed, a sofa, a small table, and chairs. It took a while to get it all set up. I officially moved all my belongings in about 8 weeks ago. For the first time, I had a place that was truly mine, one that I had earned. The demand for my apartment seemed to appear out of nowhere, but my mother and sister always held a somewhat peculiar attitude regarding my money. It was as if they believed that because I was employed and single, whatever I earned was partly theirs, or at the very least, they should have a say in how I spent it or receive a portion of it. For instance, if I brought up receiving a work bonus, my mother would almost instantly suggest something I could purchase for the house, meaning Grandma's house where they resided. On one occasion, it was a new washing machine they required. I noted that they lived there, and maintenance was their responsibility, but she made me feel guilty, claiming the old one was a true hassle. I believe I eventually gave her half the money for it. Addison behaved similarly. Even after she began working a part-time job at a local shop, she'd frequently ask me for money. "Can you lend me 50? My paycheck is delayed." Or, "My phone bill is higher than I expected. Can you assist?" It wasn't usually large sums, but it occurred often. Her justification was always that I earned more than her, and didn't have children or a partner to provide for. I frequently conceded, merely to maintain peace, but it did begin to trouble me. Then, approximately 2 years ago, Addison began dating Walt. He's 26. Roughly a year into their relationship, he moved into Grandma's house with Mom and Addison. I wasn't pleased about that whatsoever. I'd encountered Walt on a few occasions. He appeared adequate, but he never seemed to hold a steady job. He'd talk about looking for the right opportunity, or gig work, but mostly he just seemed to be around the house. Once he moved in, it felt like the requests for money, or for me to chip in for house repairs, became more frequent. My mother would call saying the electricity bill was huge, or a pipe had burst. I started pushing back more firmly, saying there were 3 adults living there now, and they needed to manage their own household budget. It usually led to her sounding disappointed in me, or saying I didn't understand how hard things were for them. A few months ago, right around the time I was in the middle of buying my apartment, Addison told us she was pregnant. My mother was over the moon about becoming a grandmother. I congratulated Addison, of course. It was big news. We didn't talk about her living situation changing. I just assumed she and Walt would either stay at Grandma's house, it's a 3-bedroom place so there's enough room, or they'd eventually get their own place like most couples do when they start a family. No one said anything to me to suggest otherwise. It was about a month after I'd finally moved all my boxes into my new apartment and was starting to feel settled. My mother called me earlier in the week. She said we needed to have a family meeting and that it was very important. She asked me to come over to Grandma's house. I figured it was something about the baby. Maybe planning a baby shower or talking about names. Figured it was something about the baby, perhaps planning a baby shower or discussing names. I didn't expect anything major. I drove over that afternoon. When I entered the living room, my mother, Addison, and Walt were all sitting there looking very serious. There was a chocolate cake sitting on the coffee table. I recall thinking that was a little odd for an important meeting. Why the cake? My mother started talking. She began with a lengthy speech about how families are supposed to support each other, how everyone has to make sacrifices for the good of the family. Then she started talking about Addison and the baby, how Addison was pregnant, and it was a vulnerable time for her, how Walt was really trying hard to find a good, stable job, but the economy was tough. Addison sat there, mostly looking down at her lap. She looked truly uncomfortable. Walt was just staring at his shoes, not saying a word. And then my mother simply came out with it. She said that since I was single and I had this new 2-bedroom apartment all to myself, and Addison and Walt were about to start their family and desperately needed a stable, nice place for the baby, the obvious and fair solution was for me to give my apartment to Addison and Walt. She didn't ask. She stated it as if it were the only logical thing to do. She said I could move into the spare bedroom at Grandma's house. She even smiled, as though she'd solved a big problem that I hadn't even known existed. She said it was my family duty and the Christian thing to do, even though we weren't a particularly religious family. I was completely floored. I think my jaw literally dropped. I just stared at her for a few seconds, trying to process what she'd just said. Give them my apartment? The one I'd just bought? The one I'd worked 6 years for, she continued, saying that I didn't really need all that space just for one person. She said Addison deserved a fresh start and a new, clean place for her first baby. She stressed how perfect my apartment would be for them, new appliances freshly painted. She even mentioned that it would be so much simpler for her to help Addison with the baby if Addison was living in my apartment, because it was nicer than Grandma's old house. When I finally found my voice, I told her, very clearly and very calmly, "No," I said, "that is absolutely not going to happen." I explained, I worked for 6 years to save up for that apartment. It's mine. I bought it with my money. I'm not giving it to anyone. I told them Addison and Walt could keep living in Grandma's house, which is perfectly fine and has plenty of room, or they could search for their own apartment, like every other young couple starting a family does. The shift in my mother was immediate. It was like a switch flipped. Her face grew tight and red. Her voice shifted from sweet and reasonable to loud and angry. She began yelling that I was being incredibly selfish. She said I was ungrateful. She claimed they had allowed me to benefit from Grandma's house all these years by not making me pay for its upkeep or demanding I sell my share earlier, which was a complete distortion of reality, since I co-owned it and they were living there entirely rent-free. Addison instantly started to cry, with big, heavy sobs, saying, "I can't believe you don't care about me or my baby. How can you be so cruel?" Walt finally looked up and muttered something like, "Yeah, man, I thought you were a better person than this. This is low." The dispute grew louder and nastier. I kept my voice steady, but I was resolute. I reiterated, "My apartment is not an option. It's not open for discussion." My mother grew increasingly agitated. She was pacing back and forth somewhat. Then she walked over to the coffee table, took a large slice of that chocolate cake with her bare hand, and she hurled it right at me. It struck me squarely in the chest and splattered onto my face and into my hair. She was screaming by this point, genuinely screaming, that I was a disgrace, an awful son, and how could I prioritize my own selfish desires over the needs of my pregnant sister and her unborn child. Addison was crying loudly. Walt was just standing there, looking stunned, but also kind of agreeing with my mother. I didn't yell back. I just took a napkin from the table and slowly wiped the cake off my face and cleaned it as best I could. I told them, "This conversation is over." I said I was departing. As I walked toward the front door, all three of them were yelling at me. My mother was shouting that I would regret this for the rest of my life, that if I walked out that door without agreeing, I was no longer her son. Addison was crying that I was going to cause her to have a miscarriage because of all the stress I was putting her under. It was a chorus of insults. I simply walked out and closed the door behind me. I drove back to my apartment, the scent of chocolate cake still on me. I felt numb at first, then truly angry. I didn't answer my phone when it started ringing almost immediately. My mother, then Addison. I let it go to voicemail. The messages they left were more of the same. The following week was a nightmare. My phone was constantly blowing up. My mother sent these incredibly long, rambling text messages, pages and pages of them, about how I was tearing the family apart, how I was selfish, how I owed it to Addison. She wrote about all the sacrifices she'd made for us as children. Addison sent shorter texts, but they were more emotional. Things like, "You're going to make me lose this baby. I hope you're happy. And my baby deserves a good home. And you're denying it that." She even sent me a picture of an ultrasound with a message saying, "This I hope you're happy. And my baby deserves a good home. And you're denying it that." She even sent me a picture of an ultrasound with a message saying, "This is who you're hurting." Then the extended family began. My mother must have contacted everyone she knew. My aunts, my mother's sisters began calling me. A few cousins I hadn't spoken to in ages sent me messages on social media. They all shared the same tale, obviously instructed by my mother, that I was being terribly selfish and irrational. I was wealthy because I possessed an apartment, seemingly, and was declining to assist my poor pregnant sister. A single aunt informed me I needed to do the right thing and honor my mother. Another charged me with abandoning my family responsibilities. Not one of them appeared to know that Addison already resided without charge in a dwelling I partly owned, or that the request was for me to relinquish my personal, recently acquired residence. I attempted to clarify the matter to the initial aunt who rang, but she just spoke over me, stating family comes first. Following that, I didn't care to engage much. I dispatched a single group text to my mother and sister. I stated, "My choice regarding my apartment is final. It is not your property, and I will not be handing it over to you. Your conduct at the gathering, notably Mom tossing cake at me, and this persistent badgering since, is utterly unacceptable. Do not get in touch with me about the apartment again." That did not deter them. If anything, it provoked them further. The text continued. I began blocking numbers. First my mother, then Addison, then the aunts. It proved stressful. I was not getting good sleep. It became utterly apparent that they genuinely, truly, felt they had a right to my apartment, and I was the villain for refusing. There was no comprehension whatsoever of my perspective, my efforts, my entitlements. The reality that they possessed a perfectly suitable, free dwelling in a house I partly owned simply did not even register with them as a consideration. The family gathering involving the cake throwing occurred approximately 4 weeks ago now. The badgering, the phone calls, the messages, the guilt-inducing remarks. That's been almost ceaseless until I began blocking individuals. There has been no resolution, no apology, nothing of that sort. Matters haven't settled. Their conviction that I've mistreated them appears to have grown even firmer. I haven't uttered a word directly to my mother or sister since I departed that house, aside from that single text message I dispatched to them. All their efforts to communicate have been one-sided, offensive messages, demands, or attempts to enlist other relatives to influence me. It required several weeks of this continuous strain for me to genuinely think clearly. I recognized that this was not merely a singular, outlandish request. This was their perception of me as a resource, not as an individual with his own existence and his own possessions. Their feeling of entitlement was so immense, they couldn't grasp how flawed their request was. The circumstance that they were residing rent-free in my grandmother's house, a dwelling I co-owned and contributed my portion of taxes to indirectly by providing for various items, while insisting on my personal apartment, that was the moment where something broke within me. Therefore, after all this, after comprehending that they will probably never respect me, my limits, or my possessions, I've reached a significant decision. Their conduct has compelled my hand. I visited an attorney last week. I located one who focuses on property disagreements. I presented the entire account to him, displaying a duplicate of my grandmother's will and the property deed for her residence. He verified all the details. Addison and I possess it equally. There are no specific provisions in the will stating that she or my mother holds a lifelong right to reside there, or similar clauses. The attorney clarified something known as a partition sale. He mentioned that if joint owners of a property cannot reach an accord on its disposition, one co-owner can approach the court and request a judge to mandate the property's sale. Subsequently, the proceeds from the sale are divided among the owners. He noted it's a typical legal remedy for circumstances such as these. Thus, that is my intention. I've directed my attorney to commence the procedure to compel the sale of my grandmother's residence. Should Addison, my mother, and Walt wish to continue residing there, Addison will need to purchase my 50% stake at its present fair market value. My attorney and I examined comparable homes in that vicinity, and it's likely valued at approximately $350,000 to $400,000. Hence, my portion would amount to $175,000 to $200,000. Considering their financial state, particularly with Walt not employed consistently, I gravely question if Addison can produce that sum of money. Therefore, the most probable outcome is that the residence will be sold to an outside party, and Addison and I will each receive our portion of the funds. This implies, naturally, that my mother, Addison, and Walt will be required to vacate and locate an alternative place of residence, and it signifies that any connection I believed I shared with them will be entirely severed. I also intend to render the current no contact permanent with all of them, including any of the extended family who joined their cause to torment me. I am presenting all of this here on Reddit because I need to unburden myself, and I suppose I wish to ascertain if I am proceeding excessively. So, am I mistaken for undertaking this? Update 1. Greetings, everyone. 2 months have passed since I composed my initial post. Firstly, I want to express my gratitude. Truly, I perused every single comment and private message. I anticipated a mixed response, perhaps even some individuals suggesting I was being severe. But nearly everyone was remarkably encouraging and provided some genuinely valuable counsel. It actually made a significant impact to realize that I wasn't irrational for deeming their demand unreasonable. Simply knowing other people perceived the situation clearly assisted me in feeling more assured in what I needed to accomplish. Many of you posed analogous inquiries, so I wish to clarify a few points. Some individuals inquired if there was any small print in Grandma's will, such as a clause granting Mom or Addison lifelong occupancy. I had my lawyers scrutinize this very meticulously. The will is straightforward. The house was bequeathed to my grandson, my name, and my granddaughter, Addison's name, in equal portions as tenants in common. That's all. No mention of anyone having special rights to live there permanently. I touched on this earlier, but to be more specific, my lawyer obtained a couple of informal estimates from local real estate agents. They believe Grandma's house, a 3-bedroom standalone home in a decent but not fancy suburb, would likely sell for between $350,000 and $400,000 in the current market. So my half would be around $175,000 to $200,000 before any selling costs or taxes. Some inquired if I'd ever contributed to major repairs or taxes on Grandma's house. Throughout the 7 years, I probably chipped in a few $1,000s on occasion for emergencies they claimed they couldn't cover, like a new water heater one winter, and part of a property tax bill when my mom said she was short. I never asked for it back. I co-owned it, so I figured some contribution was fair, even though they were living there rent-free. But I never paid regular bills or a mortgage, as there was no mortgage. Addison's boyfriend, Walt, still the same situation, as far as I know. He's around, but no signs of a steady job. He was definitely part of the family meeting chorus, telling me I was selfish. He benefits from the rent-free living, too. Any further communication attempts by me? No. After that one text I sent them right after the cake incident, I haven't tried to talk to them. My lawyer suggested it was best if all official matters about the house went through him. And honestly, after their behavior, I didn't want to talk to them anyway. Reading all the comments here and having a couple of months for things to settle a bit, even though it was still a sandstorm of family drama, really solidified my decision. The main thing I kept coming back to, and what so many of you noted, was the complete lack of respect. It wasn't just about them wanting my apartment. It was about how they asked, how they reacted when I said no, and how they truly believed they had a right to something I'd worked so hard for. It showed me that they don't see me as an independent person with my own life. They see me as someone who exists to provide for them. The idea of them just carrying on living in Grandma's house, rent-free, while bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen, and feeling like I was the one who had wronged them, it just became impossible for me to accept. Selling the house was never my first choice, ever. But I realized it was the only way to make a clean break. It was the only way to stop them from having this financial and emotional hold over me. Any smaller action, like simply asking for rent, I felt they would fight, ignore, or use it as another way to make my life difficult. This had to be a final cut. So I went ahead with it. Here's what happened with the lawyer and the house. 1. Finding the right lawyer, I spent some time researching lawyers. I didn't want simply anyone. I found someone who had considerable experience with property disputes between family members. Our first meeting was roughly an hour and a half. I told him the whole story, from Grandma's will to the cake. He was very calm and simply listened, asked a few questions. Family members. Our first meeting was roughly an hour and a half. I told him the whole story, from Grandma's will to the cake. He was very calm and simply listened, asked a few questions. He clarified the partition sale process very well. 2. Formal letter sent. The first formal step my lawyer initiated was to draft a very formal letter. It was sent by registered mail to my sister, Addison, because she's the co-owner. He also sent a copy to my mother, simply so she was formally informed as a resident. The letter was courteous, but resolute. It expressed my intent to sell my 50% share of the property. It comprised the independent market appraisal range, $350,000 to $400,000. It then officially presented Addison with the first opportunity to buy my share of the house at fair market value. We gave her 30 days to respond if she wished to purchase my share. 3. The response: we didn't truly anticipate Addison would be able to buy me out, and she didn't. We received no formal response from Addison or any lawyer representing her within that 30-day period. What my lawyer did receive, roughly 2 weeks after our letter was sent, was a handwritten letter from my mother. It was anything but polite. It was multiple pages long, filled with furious accusations. She accused me of being avaricious, of attempting to render my own sister and her baby homeless, of betraying Grandma's memory. She insisted I cease this legal absurdity at once. 4. Submitting to the court. Once the 30 days had concluded, and Addison had not presented an offer to acquire my share, my lawyer proceeded to file the partition lawsuit with the local court. This constitutes a formal legal action. It essentially requests a judge to mandate the sale of the house, because the co-owners cannot reach an agreement. Addison was then officially served with the court documents. This indicates a professional process server, personally delivered the legal papers to her at Grandma's house. This entire process, from making a firm decision after my original post, to engaging the lawyer, his dispatching the letter, awaiting a reply, and subsequently filing the court papers, spanned approximately 6 weeks. It seemed like an extended 6 weeks. Indeed, the reaction was largely what I anticipated, only more vociferous. When Addison actually received the official court papers for the lawsuit, that's when matters truly escalated. It was tangible now, not merely a letter from a lawyer, but a court case. My mother seemingly telephoned my lawyer's office repeatedly. She shouted at his paralegal, insisting on speaking to him, accusing him of assisting me in destroying his family. The paralegal was quite professional, apparently, and simply informed her that her daughter, Addison, would require her own lawyer. Addison obtained a lawyer through legal aid. Her lawyer filed a response to my lawsuit. According to my lawyer, their initial action was to attempt to delay the process. They also presented arguments stating that Addison should be allowed to continue residing in the house because she was pregnant and had a low income. They proposed that perhaps I should be compelled to sell my share to her for a significantly reduced price, or allow her to pay me off over a great many years. My lawyer said those arguments were highly improbable to prevail in court. The most significant immediate outcome is that they now understand I am not retreating. This is not a mere threat. It is proceeding. The legal wheels are turning. My mother, Addison, and Walt are apparently exceptionally stressed. Addison is in her 3rd trimester now, so the timing is not ideal for her, but this situation was a consequence of their own demands and actions. For me, even though this is a truly disagreeable process, the act of taking these steps has lifted a great burden. It's no longer just me confronting their emotional pressure. It's a legal issue, now being managed by professionals. I've maintained blocks on my mother and sister on my phone and social media. All essential communication now flows from my lawyer to Addison's lawyer. It's a strange form of relief. It's challenging, but it's a path to truly resolving this definitively. There's no way I'm stopping this now. Update 2. It's been 10 months now since I wrote that initial post, wondering if I was in the wrong. It's been roughly 8 months since my first update, when the legal process was just beginning. It feels like an eternity ago in certain ways. The legal matters concerning the house sale extended much longer than I expected, but it's finally concluded. Throughout these past 10 months, life otherwise has simply been work, attempting to concentrate on my job, keeping my head down. I did receive a minor promotion at work, which was a welcome piece of good news amidst all this stress. The court did ultimately order the partition sale of Grandma's house. It was not a swift process. Addison's legal aid lawyer attempted everything possible to slow it down. They submitted motions, requested extensions. They contended that Addison should be permitted to remain in the house because she was a new mother, having had the baby during this period, and possessed limited income. They portrayed me as the affluent, heartless brother, attempting to evict his struggling sister and her newborn. My lawyer was compelled to respond to all of this, explaining that I was simply exercising my legal right as a co-owner and that the situation was brought about by their initial unreasonable demands. There were a few brief court hearings that my lawyer attended on my behalf. I was not required to attend, which I was grateful for. The judge ultimately concurred that the law was unambiguous, the property needed to be sold, and the proceeds distributed since we could not reach an accord. The court then assigned an impartial real estate agent to manage the sale. This ensured everything was conducted fairly and independently. Having the house actually listed required an additional couple of months. My mother and sister were, as anticipated, not highly cooperative with the agent. The agent informed my lawyer that complicated the scheduling of viewings. Occasionally they would not answer the door, or the house would be untidy when prospective buyers arrived. My lawyer had to dispatch another formal letter to Addison's lawyer, cautioning them that if they continued hindering the sale, we would request the court to intervene further, and they could be deemed accountable for any additional costs or postponements. That appeared to have some effect somewhat. They grew more amenable, but I am certain they were not pleased. The house was formally listed for approximately 3 months. It garnered a fair degree of interest. It ultimately sold for $380,000. This was a favorable price, precisely within the anticipated range. After all expenses were settled, the real estate agent's commission, legal fees for the sale itself, and various other standard closing costs, the total sum remaining to be divided between me and Addison was approximately $345,000. Thus, my 50% share amounted to $170,500. Addison received precisely the same amount. The funds were transferred into my bank account last week. Witnessing that transfer materialize was an odd sensation, primarily relief. My mother, Addison, Walt, and the baby, a boy I learned indirectly, were required to vacate the house prior to the sale's closing. The real estate agent conducted a final inspection. She reported they left it fairly clean, with no significant damage, which had been one of my concerns. Apparently it was quite cluttered, and they waited until the final possible day to relocate all their belongings. I can only imagine how stressful that must have been for them, yet they had months of warning that this was approaching. My life now, I remain in my apartment, naturally. It feels even more like my refuge now. That $172,500 from the sale is currently held in a high-interest savings account while I determine its future use. Perhaps invest it or utilize it as a down payment on a small rental property later on. For now, simply knowing it's available and that the financial tie to my family is entirely severed provides immense relief. I sleep more soundly. I experience less stress at work. Regarding my mother's situation, I lack any direct contact with anyone, yet I've gathered fragments of information through informal channels, primarily a distant cousin who is more impartial and occasionally shares ambiguous posts on social media that appear to reference the circumstances. It appears my mother relocated to live with one of her sisters, my Aunt Carol. From what I understand, it's a very brief stay, and Aunt Carol's house is small, so it's already creating some tension there. Mom is said to be quite bitter. She's informing everyone she can that I'm a monster who made my own family homeless for money. Addison and Walt's situation. With her $172,500, Addison and Walt seemingly rented a small apartment. It's in a town about an hour's drive from the city, where rents are cheaper. I have no other specific information. That amount is significant for them. If they are wise, it might serve as a down payment for their own small home, or at least provide them with a decent buffer. However, given Walt's employment history and their previous appeals for funds from me, I question how long it will sustain them. Addison has her baby now. I have no clue if Walt ever found that steady job he was reportedly seeking. I'm an uncle, yet I've never met my nephew. That's an odd notion. Regarding my extended family, most of the relatives who phoned to tell me how selfish I was still never seen my nephew. That's an odd notion. My extended family, most of those relatives who called me to express my selfishness, are now entirely quiet. No apologies. Nothing. 2 of my younger cousins with whom I had a closer bond as children did contact me personally some months ago. They mentioned they'd learned more particulars. I believe one of them may have viewed my initial anonymous submission, or perhaps someone shared it. They showed considerably more understanding, even a touch of sympathy. I was polite, but I kept the discussions brief and didn't encourage further contact. The trust is gone. No contact has been maintained. I've had no direct contact with my mother or sister since before the court proceedings truly commenced. They haven't attempted to call or text me in months. I believe they finally realized it was futile, or their lawyers advised them to stop. It's just silence, and truthfully, the silence is calm. The sale of Grandma's house is certainly the end of this entire unpleasant saga. It was a difficult, exhausting, and truly sorrowful process from beginning to end. It caused me to view my family, especially my mother and sister, in an entirely new perspective, and not a good one. It solidified the truth that we no longer truly have a relationship. This next one will make your jaw drop. I'm Dan. I'm 32. My wife, Rosie, is 30. We'd been together for 5 years before deciding to get married. Rosie's mom, Glenn, my mother-in-law, is a single mother. Rosie's dad isn't in the picture, hasn't been for a long time. Glenn always came across as a devoted mom, and for the most part, Rosie had a decent, though sometimes intense relationship with her. I got along with Glenn well enough initially. There wasn't much to suggest what was approaching. We'd have dinners, holidays, the usual things. She could be somewhat overbearing at times, inclined to make everything about her, but Rosie was good at handling it, and I figured it was just a personality quirk I could deal with. The wedding planning began roughly a year before our chosen date. We wanted something nice, a celebration with our closest friends and family. We were covering most of it ourselves, with a kind contribution from my parents. Glenn offered an amount as well, which we first accepted. The initial signs of trouble started with the guest list. Rosie and I sat down and compiled our lists. Our venue had a capacity of 150, which appeared more than sufficient. My list contained roughly 70 people. Rosie's had about 60, including Glenn and some of her immediate family. This left a comfortable margin. We presented Glenn with the general breakdown. She mentioned that she had quite a number of friends and family members she wished to invite. We asked her to provide us with a list, and we'd see what was possible, assuming it would be just a handful of people. Her first list contained 40 names. Many of these were individuals Rosie barely knew, or hadn't seen since her childhood. Some were Glenn's personal friends who shared no connection with me or Rosie as a couple. We explained that we couldn't host that many, as it would involve cutting our own friends or members of my family. Glenn grew quite upset. She contended that as the mother of the bride, and as a financial contributor, she ought to have a significant say. She asserted it was crucial for her to have her people there, to support her on Rosie's important day. We attempted to compromise. We negotiated back and forth, and succeeded in reducing her additions to roughly 15 people that Rosie felt were reasonable enough to include. Individuals who had at least some connection to her life throughout the years. This meant our overall guest count was now nearing 145, close to the maximum, but manageable. Glenn appeared to accept this, though not without some sharp remarks about how restrictive we were being and how other people allowed their mothers to invite more guests. We utilized a shared online spreadsheet for RSVPs and seating arrangements, which Glenn had viewing access to, enabling her to see who was confirmed. My cousin Rick, who uses a wheelchair following a car accident years ago, was on my list from the very start. He's family, and we share a close bond. His RSVP was among the first received. The wedding day came. The ceremony was lovely. Rosie appeared incredible. Everything appeared to be unfolding perfectly. The issue began when we got to the reception site after taking pictures. One of my ushers, my good friend Tom, drew me aside. He seemed quite uneasy. He informed me that several of my invited guests, individuals who had confirmed their attendance, had reached the venue, but their names were absent from the door list. The venue personnel, operating from a printed list they'd received, were refusing them entry. I felt perplexed. I proceeded to the entrance. Indeed, a few of my aunts and uncles stood outside, appearing puzzled. They mentioned they'd been informed there was no room, that the venue had reached its limit. I promptly located the venue manager. She presented me with the ultimate guest list she had gotten. It had been sent to her via email 3 days earlier from Glenn's email address. Glenn had seemingly telephoned the venue coordinator, asserting she was assisting Rosie with final adjustments, and had dispatched an updated list. I quickly reviewed it. Approximately 30 of my guests, encompassing some of my dearest family friends and even a few relatives, were missing. In their stead were 30 names I didn't know. Glenn's friends, distant family members of hers, individuals we had clearly stated we could not invite. My cousin Rick's name remained on it, fortunately, but numerous others were absent. The venue manager clarified that Glenn had informed them there was a rigid fire code limit of 120, our initial venue capacity was 150, and we were targeting approximately 145 following her additions. Glenn had told the venue that due to unexpected last-minute acceptances from the bride's side, they needed to shorten the list, and she had assisted by providing the updated version, prioritizing crucial family. Rosie found me then, saw the distress on my face, and I quickly clarified what Tom had informed me and what the manager had shown me. She was completely horrified. She looked like she was going to be ill. She at once confronted Glenn, who was already inside, socializing with her recently invited guests. Glenn's first defense was outright denial. She claimed she had no idea what Rosie was talking about. Then when Rosie pressed her, showing her the email on the manager's phone, Glenn switched tactics. She said, very loudly so her friends could hear, that the venue had presented a sudden capacity issue to them at the last minute, and she'd done her best to salvage the situation by ensuring Rosie's closest family were there. She insisted she had to make some difficult choices, and that it was merely a misunderstanding. I was exaggerating. She said she'd tried to call me but couldn't reach me. I had no missed calls. Rosie was furious and began to cry. She told Glenn she had no right. A heated, hushed argument ensued. Rosie tried to get the venue to let my turned-away guests in, but many had already left, deeply offended and embarrassed. We managed to get a few who were still lingering nearby into the venue, but it was disorderly and dreadful. The mood quickly turned bad for me and my family, since we all knew what had occurred. My parents were extremely distressed, but they tried to remain calm for our benefit. The reception went on, yet it felt like a pretense. Next were the toasts. My best man delivered a wonderful speech. My dad offered some lovely words. Then it was Glenn's moment. She was clearly already drunk. She had been drinking wine heavily from the instant she got there. She took the microphone, swayed slightly, and started what I can only call a character assassination masked as a toast. She began by making passive-aggressive remarks about how certain people, obviously referring to me and my family, failed to grasp the sacrifices a mother makes. Next, she shifted to outright mockery. She joked about my parents' lengthy marriage, suggesting it was dull. She ridiculed my job. Then she gestured toward my cousin Rick, who sat at a table near the front. She said something like, "And look, even Dan's cousin Rick managed to arrive for the event. We weren't certain if the venue was accessible enough for his." Grand entrance. She then did a small shimmy, imitating someone struggling, and laughed, glancing around for approval from her friends. Rick's face simply fell. He's a confident person, but this was public, unkind, and from the mother of the bride. My aunt and uncle, Rick's parents, were enraged that I allowed this to occur. A shocked, appalled quiet fell over most of the room, interrupted only by the anxious chuckling of some of Glenn's new guests. Rosie was gazing at her mother, pale, tears flowing down her cheeks. I rose, I went to the DJ, took the microphone from Glenn's hand in the middle of her rambling about something else terrible, and just said, "Thank you, Glenn. That's enough." I then asked the DJ to play some music. She appeared astonished, then scowled at me. The remainder of the reception was a haze of crisis management and hushed apologies to my family. Many of my initial guests who did attend were either perplexed by the strange faces or had heard what happened at the door and were upset for us. Rick and his parents departed soon after Glenn's toast. Rosie was distraught for much of the evening, concealing herself in the bridal suite. I spent most of it trying to comfort my family and experiencing a fury I'd seldom felt. The following morning, Rosie and I spoke. There wasn't much to talk about, truly. We both agreed. Glenn had intentionally ruined our wedding day, shamed my family, and displayed a degree of unkindness that was astounding. Rosie mentioned she didn't recognize the person her mother had turned into, or perhaps she'd been unaware of it before. We chose to end all communication with Glenn. We blocked her number, her social media, everything. Glenn naturally did not accept this silently. She began calling Rosie's friends, her extended family, attempting to portray herself as the injured party. She asserted we had overreacted to some innocent jokes and a minor error with the guest list. She stated Rosie was being manipulated by me. The following weeks brought a barrage of messages from Glenn through anyone willing to relay them. Flying monkeys, as the saying goes. She sent emotional emails which landed in spam, though Rosie glanced at one out of a dark curiosity, rambling voicemails to Rosie's previous numbers, and even attempted to appear at our apartment, but the concierge denied her entry following our directives. We upheld a firm no-contact rule. It was tough for Rosie, but she remained determined. The treachery was too profound. Roughly 2 months following the wedding, Glenn intensified matters. She began sharing ambiguous, sympathy-seeking posts on social media concerning her abandonment by her sole child, and how some families fail to value a mother's affection. Then she became more precise, leveling indirect charges about me being overbearing and isolating Rosie. She recounted a tearful tale to anyone who would hear about how she'd committed a small mistake with the guest list because of stress, and that her witty toast was misinterpreted by overly sensitive individuals. She was attempting to completely reframe the story, portraying us as the irrational, unkind ones. The ultimate breaking point arrived when a distant aunt of Rosie's phoned Rosie crying, stating Glenn had informed her that we had uninvited Glenn's acquaintances at the final moment, and that I had verbally mistreated Glenn at the reception, causing her to become agitated during her address. This was entirely contrary to what transpired. I possessed a recording. An acquaintance of mine, aware Glenn could be somewhat unpredictable when consuming alcohol, had discreetly filmed the addresses on his mobile phone. He had sent it to me the day after the wedding, primarily as a "can you fathom this" sort of item. The footage plainly displayed Glenn's inebriated condition, her derisive remarks about my family, and the particular terrible statements she uttered about Rick, succeeded by his crushed response and her heartless laughter. It likewise depicted me calmly removing the microphone from her. Upon learning of Glenn's most recent falsehoods to Rosie's aunt, I became enraged. Rosie was distressed that her mother was disseminating such inventions. Consequently, I took action. I uploaded the video segment of Glenn's toast, particularly the portion where she ridicules Rick, onto my personal private social media, viewable solely by friends and family. I did not include extensive commentary, merely something akin to, given there appears to be much erroneous information regarding what transpired at our wedding, here is a brief look at Glenn's conduct during her toast. This occurred after she covertly modified our guest list to exclude half of my family and friends. The response was instantaneous. A lot of family members, particularly on Rosie's side, who had only listened to Glenn's account, were appalled. They witnessed the truth. Glenn's efforts to gain sympathy failed dramatically. She was revealed. She attempted to assert the video had been edited or presented out of context, but it was plainly unedited footage. She has now been virtually prohibited from all broader family gatherings by common agreement. Family members from Rosie's side have informed her they are dismayed by her conduct. Rosie hasn't communicated with her since the wedding day, and following the video, Glenn has ended her public efforts, likely due to pure embarrassment and an absence of further backing. So this is why I'm writing this. Ida, for sharing that video. Update 1. My thanks to everyone who read my initial post and offered comments. I've reviewed everything. I value the support and the diverse viewpoints, even those that challenge what I did. It's provided much to consider, though ultimately my position remains largely the same. Several individuals requested some clarifications, so I'll try to cover the primary points. My cousin Rick is 28. The accident that placed him in a wheelchair occurred when he was 19. He's a remarkably strong and kind-hearted individual, but he's faced difficulties with others' thoughtlessness. We grew up together. He's more like a brother to me. My whole family is highly protective of him. For Glenn to target him with such ill intent was unfathomable. After they departed the reception, my uncle, his father, called me the following day. He was furious at Glenn, but told me not to let it further spoil our day. Rick, as per my aunt, was subdued for some days, but then informed his parents he didn't want them to fixate on it. He's encountered bullies previously. When I told him much later, after I posted the video, what I had done, he simply said, "Good. Some people only understand consequences." Regarding guest list management, the initial guest list was a collaborative Google sheet. Rosie and I listed our people, then we allocated a certain number to Glenn after her initial request for 40 names was discussed down to 15. She was given view-only access to the main list so she could see the RSVPs coming in. We were handling all direct communication with the venue. Glenn was not supposed to be an intermediary. Her claim that she called the venue to assist with last-minute changes was a complete fabrication of authority she never had. She bypassed us entirely. The email with the altered list came from her personal email directly to the venue's event coordinator, who it seems didn't think to double-check with us. Or perhaps Glenn was very convincing in her portrayal of being helpful. We found out later that Glenn had called the coordinator a few times in the week leading up, asking questions, likely to build a rapport or appear involved, so her final email wouldn't raise immediate red flags. As for Rosie's knowledge beforehand, Rosie had absolutely no idea her mother was going to do this. She was as blindsided and devastated as I was. Glenn had been a bit difficult about her initial guest requests, but Rosie thought they had reached a firm compromise. The notion that her mother would act behind our backs and fundamentally change the guest list for our wedding, particularly by removing my family, was unimaginable to her. She trusted her mother, and that trust was completely destroyed. The last-minute venue limit excuse was pure fiction from Glenn. The venue contract explicitly stated a 150 capacity. There was no sudden alteration. When Rosie confronted Glenn at the reception, after at first denying everything, she loudly declared that the venue manager had told her, Glenn, of a reduced capacity of 120 people that very morning due to unforeseen fire safety regulations. She claimed she had to act swiftly to save the day and make sure the most important guests could be there. The venue manager, when I spoke with her again later, to grasp what had occurred, confirmed Glenn had informed her the guest list had to be cut to 120 because of problems on the couple's part, and supplied the new list as the final corrected version. Glenn pitted both sides against each other, fixing things on the spot. When Rosie discovered this, she was crying, but also enraged. She quickly moved to address the situation, still deeply upset and furious. She immediately went to the venue manager with me and demanded they honor our initial list. The manager was apologetic, but explained she had already arranged things based on the list Glenn supplied, and some of my guests had already been turned away and departed. Rosie then made calls, reaching out to some of my relatives who had been turned away, offering heartfelt apologies and pleading with them to return if they were still in the vicinity. A few did, but the harm was already inflicted. Some were too distressed, and honestly, I couldn't fault them. Rosie also told Glenn unequivocally at the reception during that initial confrontation that what she did was beyond forgiveness. Glenn's public attempts to induce guilt primarily occurred on Facebook and via phone calls to extended family. On Facebook, it was ambiguous posts such as, "A mother gives everything for her child, only to be discarded when a new person appears," or "So sad when families are divided by misinterpretations and lack of appreciation." With family, she was more direct, crafting a story where she was a supportive, caring mother whose actions were misinterpreted. She asserted I was manipulating Rosie, that we were embarrassed by her friends, those she had included, and that her toast was just playful, jesting that my excessively sensitive family couldn't handle. She told one of Rosie's aunts that I had screamed at her at the reception, which was a total falsehood. Regarding where the video was shared, I posted the 45-second segment, the pertinent section of her address about Rick and my family, on my personal Facebook profile. My privacy settings permit only friends and family to view. This encompasses the majority of my relatives and a fair number of Rosie's family members who are linked with me on that platform or joined after the wedding. It wasn't a completely public post for the whole internet, but it was meant for the people Glenn was actively trying to manipulate with her lies. After reading the comments, many of you affirmed what I have already felt. Glenn's actions were a huge betrayal and intentionally destructive. I decided to post the video once I realized that Glenn's campaign of lies was causing Rosie significant pain and was effectively misleading some family members who hadn't witnessed it firsthand. Rosie was about to make a public statement herself, but she was so distressed I couldn't let her bear that burden. Glenn was counting on people only hearing her side, or on the Eitz family we should forgive angle. My logic was simple. Glenn made a public spectacle at our wedding, shaming my family. Then she started a public campaign of lies to slander us and portray herself as a victim. My reply, posting the video, was also public within our shared circle, using her own words and actions as irrefutable proof. It wasn't about revenge as wanting to inflict pain for its own sake. It was about halting her harmful narrative with unequivocal truth. It was to shield Rosie from further gaslighting and to provide our family the true picture. The video had already been posted prior to my original post here. Our action since then has been to maintain our stance of no contact with Glenn. Once the video circulated, Glenn did attempt to contact Rosie a single time using a new email address. The email contained a flood of accusations, self-pity, and demands for an apology from us for publicly shaming her. She blamed Rosie for allowing me to destroy her family. Rosie read it, showed it to me, and then erased it without responding. We strengthened blocks on any new numbers or profiles she might create. My parents also dispatched Glenn a formal letter, quite brief and direct, indicating that her conduct was reprehensible, that she is no longer welcome in their home or at any event they host, and that they expect her to stop all attempts to contact me or Rosie. This was their own idea, but we supported it. The direct result of the video becoming semi-public within our family and friend circle was dramatic. Several of Rosie's relatives who had first offered Glenn sympathy called Rosie to apologize. They stated they had no idea it was so bad and were stunned by Glenn's cruelty in the video, particularly towards Rick. The "she was just drunk" or "it was a misunderstanding" excuses vanished once people witnessed it for themselves. Glenn's brother, Rosie's uncle, phoned her. He was seemingly furious with Glenn. He informed Rosie that he had a very firm discussion with his sister, telling her that her conduct was a disgrace and that she needed to seriously reconsider her life. He also informed Rosie that although he loves his sister, he and his wife would be distancing themselves considerably from her for the near future, as they wished not to be linked with that sort of conduct. Glenn herself, following that single angry email, has become quiet. Her social media, which was formerly quite busy, has shown no fresh activity. We gather through rumor from the few remaining family members who still maintain minimal, hesitant contact with her for certain reasons, linked to older relatives, that she is enraged, mortified, and trying to convince anyone who will still pay attention that the video is fake or altered, but nobody believes it. Rosie experienced a feeling of relief once the video was released and the truth became known. The strain of being portrayed as the antagonist by her own mother and others accepting it was enormous. Witnessing family members comprehend and stand by her has been affirming. She remains profoundly wounded by her mother's actions, and there's a period of mourning for the mother she believes she had, but her determination to exclude Glenn from her life is firmer than ever. She mentioned she feels as though a burden has been removed, even despite all the sorrow. Glenn's efforts to create divisions mostly failed once the proof was evident, People chose sides, and the overwhelming majority aligned with the truth. Update 2, 2 years following the initial post, approximately 1 year and 10 months after Update 1. Almost 2 years have passed since the wedding, and around 1 year and 10 months since my last update here. Much time has passed, or perhaps the figurative water level surrounding Glenn has simply lowered, leaving her on a somewhat desolate island of her own creation. Glenn remains entirely excluded from our lives. Rosie has not communicated with her since the day of the wedding. I have had no interaction. The rule of no contact has stayed absolute. In the months after the video incident, Glenn seemingly made a few more frantic efforts to recover some standing, not with us personally, but among the broader family. We learned indirectly that she attempted to arrange a family gathering to resolve issues, which everyone refused, and mailed excessively sentimental birthday cards to some of Rosie's cousins, presumably hoping to re-establish some supportive communication. These endeavors were met with courteous but steadfast lack of interest. The harm from her wedding conduct, and the later evidence provided by the video, was too profound. Her brother, Rosie's uncle, has kept very limited contact with Glenn, primarily due to a sense of duty for any serious emergencies, but their relationship is, by all reports, exceedingly tense. He and his wife have grown considerably closer to Rosie, providing her a steady, encouraging family link on that side, which has been a favorable outcome. Rosie's initial birthday following the wedding was challenging. It was the very first time she received no call or card from her mother. As Glenn was blocked and understood any mail would be sent back, she was sad. We've had other family gatherings, holidays, birthdays, a major anniversary for my parents. Glenn has not attended any of them, nor has her absence been a significant topic of discussion, apart from perhaps a quick, sad comment among older relatives that it's a pity she caused this herself. No one has tried to push us to make up. I believe the video acted as a lasting discouragement to any "but she's your mother" arguments. It's difficult to support someone whose cruelty was so clearly shown. We hear occasional bits of news about Glenn from Rosie's uncle. She is seemingly quite alone. Many of the friends she invited to the wedding by sacrificing our guests have, it appears, moved away, now that she's no longer the fun, life of the party person, but instead someone linked to a notable family scandal. She is reportedly resentful and continues to think she is the wrong party, but she has no avenue left to express this beyond perhaps a very small, shrinking group. She has not, to our knowledge, made any further efforts to slander us publicly or to family. The video's revelation effectively stopped that. My disabled cousin, Rick, is doing well. He values that we took such a firm stance. He mentioned that Glenn's remarks, though hurtful, were more surprising due to the setting, our wedding, and the speaker, Rosie's mother. He understands his value, and Glenn's failure to recognize it is her issue, not his. He has attended all our family gatherings since, and is always treated with the love and respect he deserves. The event made our family even more protective of him, and more mindful of the casual cruelty some people are capable of. Family even more protective of him, and more mindful of the casual cruelty some people are capable of. So that's where matters currently stand. Life has gone on. Our marriage is solid. Cutting Glenn out was a drastic step, but it was an essential one for our peace and well-being. I don't expect to share any further updates on this. There's little more to add. She's no longer in our lives, and that's where she will stay. Thanks again to everyone who offered their thoughts back when this was raw. It helped to know we weren't crazy for responding the way we did.